You are listening to The Feng Shui King. Introduction. On the day I was born, 19 bolts of lightning struck around the courtyard. A fortune teller said I was a Yao Tai, a demon fetus born under heaven's curse, and that my life would be plagued by 18 great calamities. Either someone else would die, or I would die. Fate took a grim turn. The very fortune teller who pronounced my doom paid the first price. As soon as he carried me out of the village gate, he suddenly died, a gruesome death. Chapter 1. The Demon-Born Child. On the day I was born, 19 bolts of lightning struck around the courtyard, yet not a single one touched our roof. Only the 19th bolt descended straight onto the ancient elm tree in our yard, sending a column of black smoke curling into the stormy sky. The entire village witnessed that eerie scene. People still whisper that on that same day, a hunter sheltering from the rain in a mountain cave stumbled upon a dying beauty. A woman with 8 foxtails, her face pale as paper, her breath faint and fleeting. When she saw the hunter, she weakly asked, "Is there a family named Wu expecting a child?" Terrified, the hunter could only nod. The woman sighed, whispering, "So this life's debt must be repaid in this one." As soon as her words faded, thunder roared again. She closed her eyes and collapsed lifelessly. When the hunter returned with help, the cave was empty. Her body had vanished without a trace. At that very moment, I came into this world. The midwife, upon seeing me, screamed in horror, almost flinging me out the door. For I was no ordinary newborn, my chin sharp, my head oddly shaped, my mouth lined with tiny fangs, my body covered in a thin layer of white fur. Unlike other infants who cry at birth, I did not. Instead, I looked ravenous. When my mother tried to nurse me, I bit down hard and drew blood. Her scream echoed through the house as she pushed me away in terror. The midwife trembled uncontrollably. "In all my years," she stammered, "I've delivered half the children in 10 villages, but never seen a creature like this. This child is not human. It's a demon fetus. You must get rid of it, or disaster will befall your family." My father knew something was wrong, yet he could not bring himself to kill his own son, his firstborn. He summoned my grandfather, the patriarch of our family, for counsel. When my grandfather saw me, his face turned ashen. "Heaven's punishment," he muttered. "What sins did our ancestors commit to bring forth such a creature?" But even so, he could not bear to abandon me. Then, after pondering a long while, grandfather said, 19 bolts of lightning struck our house, and the last struck the old elm tree. This must be a sign. He ordered my father to seek out Master Wu Bontian, a famed geomancer in a neighboring county. Father walked through the night for miles. By dawn, he found the master and recounted everything. Wu Bontian's eyes widened with astonishment. Without hesitation, he followed my father back. When they reached our gate, both froze. Hundreds of golden weasels and foxes had gathered outside, swarming, crying, filling the yard wall to wall. No one knew where they came from. Villagers crowded around, murmuring in fear. Some said the beasts were furious because our family had birthed a demon and that calamity would soon follow. My father grabbed a stick, intending to chase them off, but Wu Bontian stopped him. "Don't," he whispered. "They mean no harm." And then the foxes and weasels fell silent. They all turned toward our house, bowed 3 times in unison, and then dispersed into the wilderness as swiftly as they came. The crowd gasped. My father's knees nearly gave way. "Master Wu," he stammered, "what does this mean?" Wu Bantian's face darkened. "Let me see the child first." When my grandfather brought me out, the master took one glance and inhaled sharply. His eyes gleamed with strange light. He asked for my exact birth time, calculated for a long moment, and then exclaimed, "This is no ordinary child, indeed a demon born. Keeping him will bring ruin. He drinks only blood. No food can sustain him. Even if you raise him, he will not survive long." Panic filled the room. My father fell to his knees. "Master, please, there must be a way. He's our flesh and blood. We can't just watch him die." Grandfather's voice trembled. "Is there truly no hope?" Wu Bantian asked quietly, "Do you know why the heavens struck your yard with 19 bolts of thunder?" Both men shook their heads. He explained solemnly, "This child's soul has been possessed by a powerful spirit, a fox demon that was about to transcend into immortality, but heaven punished it with thunder. To escape destruction, the demon fused its soul with your newborn son's body. That's why the lightning did not strike your home, because your child was innocent." He paused, and then continued, "The foxes and weasels that knelt outside your home were its kin, paying homage. That is the truth." My father burst into tears. "Then what should we do?" Wu Bantian sighed. "Only one path remains. Let him become my disciple and follow the Tao. He will suffer greatly and must leave your home forever. But at least he may live. Otherwise, he will bring death upon others. 18 tribulations before his life ends." No one realized that the first of those tribulations would fall upon Wu Bantian himself. For as soon as he carried me out of the village gate, he suddenly collapsed, blood gushing from his 7 orifices, eyes wide open in terror, and died instantly. Chapter 2. The White Fox's Offering. Wu Bantian had said that my fate was cursed. I could not survive at home and had to follow him if I were to live. He also warned that even with training, I would face 3 great calamities in life. The first at age 9, the most dangerous of all. My family, desperate to save me, agreed to let him take me away. But he died before dawn, his body found by the roadside, eyes bulging in horror, blood leaking from his nose and ears. I lay quietly beside the corpse, unharmed, staring into the morning light. The villagers whispered that my presence had killed him. His family demanded compensation, and though my parents were innocent, they paid in fear. We were poor already, now destitute. Years later, I would learn the truth. Wu Bantian died because of greed. He had sensed the spiritual power within me and wanted to claim it for himself. After his death, I was brought back home. The family was uneasy. No one dared touch me. Rumors spread like wildfire. The demon child brings death. And indeed, I refused food and milk. Only blood could calm my cries. My mother wept day after day, helpless and terrified. Then one moonless night, as my father stepped outside to relieve himself, he heard rustling in the courtyard. Peering through the gloom, he saw several white foxes and golden weasels prowling in silence. Their eyes glowed eerily, and one large white fox stood at the window, peeking into the house. Rage overcame his fear. Cursing, he grabbed a brick and hurled it. The brick struck the fox squarely, making it shriek in pain, a high, mournful sound that froze his blood. The fox turned its glowing eyes upon him, bearing sharp fangs. At that instant, the door creaked open. Grandfather stepped out, holding his gleaming war blade. He was nearly 70, yet still tall and strong, once a soldier who fought invaders with the great saber corps. When he glared, his presence alone could quell men. The beasts scattered immediately. Grandfather turned to father. What happened? They were creeping around the yard. A white fox even climbed to the window. Grandfather sighed. Misfortune upon misfortune. All my life I've done no evil, yet heaven tests me thus. Just then his eyes caught something near the doorway, a pile of dark shapes twitching faintly. He bent down and found several wild hares, plump but dying, their necks pierced by tiny bite marks. Perhaps, grandfather murmured, the foxes brought these. Father frowned, unsure, but finally nodded. That night they let the blood of the hares drip into a bowl and fed it to me. For the first time I drank my fill and slept peacefully. From that night on, the foxes returned again and again, leaving gifts of wild game, birds, and fish. Our once poor family suddenly had meat every day. Father even sold some at the market. People envied us, though they dared not speak of it out loud. Time passed, 3 years of strange peace. The foxes never stopped coming. I grew stronger, though still unable to eat anything but blood. The fur on my body faded away. My features softened into those of a normal child, perhaps even handsome. But on my 3rd birthday, grandfather's face darkened with dread. He remembered the geomancer's prophecy. Every 3 years, a great calamity. That day, someone in the village died, and they said I was the cause. Chapter 3. A Bowl of Wild Blood. When I was 3 years old, it was during a great drought. On my birthday, nearly all the adults in the village went out to water their crops. My family was no exception, leaving me alone at home. Before leaving, they placed a bowl of wild chicken blood on the table and told me, if you get hungry, drink this. Though I was only 3, I was far more perceptive than other children my age, and very obedient. I sat quietly in the yard, playing by myself, without crying or fussing. Since birth, I had always been alone. No other child in the village wanted to play with me because their parents forbade them. They said I was a monster child who didn't eat food but drank blood, and every night foxes and golden weasels came to our house to offer sacrifices. Everyone in the village treated me like a poisonous snake. Whenever they saw me, they ran away. That day, I was playing in the yard as usual, amusing myself by peeing on an anthill, when suddenly I heard the laughter of children outside the gate. The sound instantly caught my attention. For 3 years I had almost never stepped beyond the courtyard, because whenever I appeared, the villagers avoided me. But deep down, I longed desperately for someone to play with. Even a single word from another child would have made me happy. Hearing those cheerful voices, I ran to the gate and peered through the crack. Just outside was a small pile of sand, left by the neighbors for building their house. On that pile, 4 or 5 children were playing together, shaping the sand and laughing joyfully. Watching them filled me with yearning. I was only 3, and without thinking, I ran out, wanting to join them. But the moment they saw me, one child screamed in terror. An older boy pointed at me and shouted, "The freak is here! The blood-drinking monster is here! Whoever talks to him will be cursed!" At those words, the group scattered in panic. Within seconds, they were gone. Only I remained, standing alone and bewildered, watching their figures disappear. A wave of loneliness and sadness welled up inside me. Still, I told myself it was fine. They didn't want to play with me. I could play by myself. I picked up some of their toys and sat on the sand pile, continuing to build sandhouses alone. Then from the other side of the sand pile, a soft voice suddenly spoke. "Let's play together." I looked up and saw a chubby little boy about my age, his nose running with 2 long streaks of snot, but his clothes were surprisingly clean. I grinned happily. "Okay, let's build a big house together." The other children had all fled, but this plump boy stayed. We were both too young to know fear, so we sat on the sand pile together, happily building our sand castle. After a while, the chubby boy rummaged through his pocket and pulled out a piece of candy, holding it out to me. "It's sweet," he said. I had never eaten candy before. Since birth, I had consumed nothing but blood. Still, I accepted it and put it in my mouth, tasting it curiously, but I couldn't sense any flavor. Yet I felt grateful for his kindness, and I wanted to return it. While chewing the candy, I said eagerly, "I have something tasty too. Wait here, I'll get it for you." Excited, I ran inside and came back carrying the bowl of wild chicken blood my parents had left for me. The chubby boy didn't know what it was, so I demonstrated, taking a sip and leaving a red streak around my mouth. He giggled, and I laughed too. Curious, he picked up the bowl and tried to mimic me, but his little hands were unsteady. He accidentally spilled the entire bowl on himself. That was my only meal for the day, and as I stared at the blood soaking into the dirt, my heart sank in despair. Before I could react, a shrill scream tore through the air behind me. "You damned monster! You dared harm my son!" A furious woman with a vicious face rushed toward me, grabbed me by the collar, lifted me off the ground, and hurled me down with all her strength. My small body hit the hard earth, pain exploded through me, and I burst into sobs. Through my tears, I noticed faint greenish eyes watching from afar, dozens of them, fixed both on me and the raging woman. The woman hurriedly scooped up her son, checked him all over, saw he was unharmed, only his clothes stained red, but her fury didn't fade. She stormed over again and screamed, and kicked me twice with all her might. "You damned creature! You gave my child blood to drink! I'll beat you to death!" I was only a 3-year-old child. Her kick sent me flying, pain so sharp I couldn't even cry. Just then, my grandfather came back from the fields with his hoe. Seeing her attacking me, he sprinted forward and shoved the woman away, roaring, "Old Ma's wife, why are you beating my grandson?" The woman, still furious, shouted back, "Ask your cursed monster what he did. He gave my boy blood to drink. If anything happens to my son, I'll make your whole family pay." My grandfather scooped me into his arms. I was crying so hard I could barely breathe, and his face twisted in anguish. Then he turned toward the chubby boy and froze in shock. The child's body was splattered with blood from head to toe, looking as if he had crawled out of a pool of it, a terrifying sight. I could drink blood safely, but for an ordinary child, even a little could cause grave harm. My grandfather knew he was in the wrong and couldn't argue. He kept apologizing and carried me home, while the furious woman refused to relent, standing at our door cursing loudly until the neighbors gathered to watch. Cradled in my grandfather's arms, I still caught glimpses of those faint green eyes glimmering from the weeds, eyes filled with cold hostility toward the woman. My grandfather set me down and scolded me. "Teokip, didn't I tell you to stay inside? Why did you run out?" Teokip was my childhood name. My full name is Ngokip. Ngabon Tien once said I was born to endure calamities, fated to face 18 great disasters in life. That's why grandfather named me so. I was still sniffling as I said between sobs, "I wanted to play. I wanted to play with them. He gave me candy and I wanted to give him something good too." My grandfather sighed deeply, unable to scold me anymore. Children are innocent. They believe giving someone their favorite thing is an act of kindness. That night, when my parents returned and heard what happened, they scolded me harshly and warned me never to leave the house again. Everyone thought the matter was over, but in truth, it was only the beginning. Because the next morning, they found the corpse of old Ma's wife in the mountains. Her death was gruesome beyond words, her body covered with bite marks, flesh torn apart, her skin ripped to shreds. And that leg, the one stripped to white bone, was the very same leg that had kicked me the day before.
Chapter 4. The Coffin Touches the Ground. The death of Ma Laosan's wife shocked the entire village. According to her husband, that night had seemed ordinary. They'd gone to bed as usual. But around midnight, he heard noises outside. Half asleep, he thought he heard someone calling his wife's name, soft, almost playful. She rose wordlessly and left the bed. He assumed she was going to relieve herself and drifted back to sleep. By dawn, she was gone. He searched the house, the yard, the fields, nothing. Soon the villagers joined the hunt, combing every ravine and thicket until someone screamed from the mountain path. What they found made even the bravest men turn pale. Her body lay sprawled on the stones, shredded, mauled, drenched in blood. One leg was eaten down to the bone, and yet her face still wore a smile. They brought her home, trembling. In our village tradition, required that a body be kept in the house for 3 days before burial. So they placed it in a wooden coffin in the center of their hall, candles burning on either side. Neighbors came to pay respects. My father, out of decency, brought a bundle of paper offerings. When he tried to burn them before the coffin, something strange happened. The paper would not burn. The flames licked them weakly, then died. Even when he poured wine into the fire, the embers hissed and vanished. A cold wind swept through the room. Ash and dust swirled, stinging his eyes. Startled, Father set down the bowl of incense sticks, but as he did, 2 of the 3 sticks snapped clean in half, leaving only the middle one standing. 2 short, 1 long, a dire omen. People murmured fearfully. In folk belief, it meant the dead bore hatred toward the living. Pale and shaken, Father hurried home and told Grandfather everything. The old man listened in silence, then sighed. "We all know," he said heavily, "that woman's death is tied to the boy." Indeed, everyone remembered she had struck me the day before, and the marks on her body looked as though beasts had torn her apart, the very kind of foxes and weasels that once knelt at our gate. Rumors spread like wildfire. They said the demon child had sent his spirits to kill her. At first, some doubted, but that night their doubts died too, because nearly everyone in my family had the same dream. In it, the dead woman limped into our home, 1 foot missing flesh, her face warped by hatred, her eyes open wide. She smiled and whispered, "The cursed child killed me. If he doesn't die, your whole family will follow me into the grave." Even her husband, Ma Lao San, dreamed of her that night. He woke screaming, clutching his knife. By sunrise, he stormed to our house, his eyes wild. "Give me the boy!" he shouted. "He killed my wife!" My parents were terrified, speechless. Then Grandfather stepped forward, calm as stone. He pushed me gently in front of the man and said, "If you truly believe this child took your wife's life, then kill him. Go on." Ma Lao San trembled. His knuckles whitened around the knife, but he could not move. He knew, if he killed me, the law would hang him. At last, he spat on the ground and left, weeping with rage. 3 days later came the burial. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds. Young men from the village came to carry the coffin, but as soon as they lifted it, the ropes snapped. The coffin fell, striking the earth with a dull, dreadful thud. Gasps rippled through the crowd, for in our custom, a coffin must never touch the ground until it reaches the graveyard. If it does, it means the dead refuses to leave. Ma Lao San dropped to his knees beside the coffin, sobbing. "Wife, I know you died unjustly, but don't curse us. If you seek revenge, go after the one who wronged you, not me." And then it began. The chittering, screeching, unholy noise. Hundreds of foxes and golden weasels poured from the forest, flooding the road like a living tide. Among them was a giant weasel with a white streak running down its back. It marched solemnly to the coffin, circled it 3 times, then raised its paw and struck the lid, once, twice, thrice. thud, thud, thud. Each sound echoed through the valley like a heartbeat. Then, as suddenly as they had come, creatures vanished. The pallbearers lifted the coffin again. This time it did not fall. They buried her quietly. But peace did not return. The next morning, her grave was found dug open, and her body was gone.
Chapter 5. 3 days left. In fact, on that very night, the corpse of Ma Lao Tam's wife had already climbed out of the coffin because at the exact stroke of midnight, she appeared at my house. Back then, the Kurusan village was still extremely poor, with no electricity. At night, every household only lit candles or oil lamps, and even so, no one dared burn too many. They usually went to bed early. That midnight, while my parents were fast asleep, they suddenly heard knocking on the window. Tock, 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 tock. 3 long knocks and 1 short, a very strange rhythm. At first, my parents did not pay attention, thinking it was just the wind or branches hitting the window. But moments later, the knocking continued, faster and more urgent. Still the same 3 long, 1 short. My father groggily woke up, opened the window to look, and the moment the window opened, a foul, rotten stench burst in, so nauseating it made one want to vomit. And right before my father's eyes was a swollen, bloated face covered in patches of rot, Ma Lao Tam's wife. She was still wearing the same eerie smile from when she died, her eyes white and bulging as she stared directly at my father. In that instant, all sleep evaporated from my father's body. He screamed in terror and fell backward to the floor. His scream jolted my mother and me awake. I will never forget that face. For years afterward, I was haunted by nightmares, always seeing that horrible grin in those bulging white eyes. My mother, upon seeing it, was terrified beyond words. She clutched me tightly, her whole body trembling. At that moment, Ma Lao Tam's wife suddenly let out a chilling, eerie laugh, then stared straight at me and rasped hoarsely, 4 days left. 4 days left. My father's scream also woke my grandfather. He rushed in, carrying his large war blade. Seeing my father collapsed on the ground and my mother clutching me in fear, my grandfather turned toward the window. The moment he caught sight of that face, a shudder ran through him as well. But he was a former soldier who had killed Japanese invaders in battle. Though shaken, he was far more steady than my parents. Narrowing his eyes, gripping his blade, he growled, Ma Lao Tam's wife, I know you bear resentment, but this is fate. No one else can be blamed. I advise you to leave immediately. Otherwise, this blade of mine will not be polite. Countless Japanese soldiers have died beneath it. Do you think you're more fearsome than they were? If you're not afraid, then I'm neither. I don't mind sending one more ghost on its way. As he spoke, he raised the large blade. The metal gleamed coldly under the candlelight, sharp enough to reflect a human silhouette. Whether because of my grandfather's war blade or something else, Ma Lao Tam's wife slowly turned away and limped off into the night. As she left, she continued laughing eerily, repeating the same words, 4 days left, 4 days left. After she departed, no one in my family dared sleep again. We sat there in silence, each wondering what the phrase, 4 days left, meant. The next morning, an old shepherd from the village climbed the mountain with his sheep and accidentally discovered that Ma Lao Tam's wife's grave had been dug open. But when Ma Lao Tam and the villagers came to look, everyone's scalp tingled with fear. The grave was not dug from the outside. The surrounding soil was pushed outwards from within. The coffin lid had shattered into pieces, scattered everywhere. It looked exactly like something had forced its way out from inside. Just imagining it made one's entire body go cold. Last night, her grave burst open by itself. The corpse had climbed out, and she had gone straight to my house to knock on the window. But Ma Lao Tam knew none of this. My grandfather and father told no one, because tensions between the families were already too high. We didn't want to stir up more trouble. Ma Lao Tam assumed grave robbers had stolen the body. Back then, stolen corpses, especially of young women, were valuable and not uncommon. His wife wasn't beautiful, but she was not yet 30, so she was still a prime target. He preferred believing grave robbers had stolen her body rather than facing a more horrifying truth. But unfortunately, the corpse was not stolen, because the next night, she returned to my house again. After witnessing the previous night's horror, my mother could not sleep. She trembled the entire night. My father tried to comfort her, saying it was surely just grave robbers, but she didn't believe him. She insisted my grandfather sleep in the main room so he could rush over with his blade if anything happened. Despite being exhausted from working the fields all day, neither my parents nor my grandfather could sleep deeply. Around midnight, just as they dozed off, tock, 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 the knocking came again. My father snapped awake, frozen. Under the pale moonlight stood a dark shadow outside the window, tapping steadily, still the same rhythm, 3 long, 1 short. My mother clutched me and sobbed in fear. My father gripped a wooden stick but didn't dare step off the bed. He whispered hoarsely, "She's back." But my grandfather was the bravest of all, once a soldier who had killed many invaders. Upon hearing the knocking, he charged in with his war blade. The gleaming blade cast a cold sheen across the room, making the tension almost unbearable. The moment he looked out the window, he sucked in a cold breath. There she was again, Ma Lao Tom's wife, her rotten, swollen face staring in, unblinking. "Still not done yet, are you?" my grandfather barked. Raising his blade, he shouted, "I'm old and have nothing left to lose. If you have the guts, take my life. And if I die, I'll become a ghost too. I'll drag you down to hell with me." As soon as he finished speaking, he stabbed the blade into the window frame, flinging the window open. Under the moonlight, Ma Lao Tom's wife stood there, her mouth twisting upward into a grotesque grin, her white eyes bulging, and then she spoke again. 3 days left. 3 days left. Even my grandfather inhaled sharply at this. Thankfully, she did not attack. She slowly turned away, propping herself on the skeletal remains of her foot, limping off into the night. At that moment, my father whispered shakily, "Dad, yesterday she said 4. Tonight she said 3. Does that mean in 3 days she will kill us all?" These past 2 nights, she had come twice, each time saying only 1 sentence, but that was enough to plunge my entire family into unprecedented terror.
Chapter 6. The Corpse That Walked. If this continues, before she manages to kill us, we will already be scared to death. That night, no one in my family could sleep. Only me, a 3-year-old child, slept soundly. Early the next morning, my grandfather made a decision, telling my father to go to Tom Top Lee Street to find a spirit-invoking shaman woman named Madame Liu to ask for help. But there was a troubling problem. Madame Liu charged an extremely high price. If you wanted her to handle a matter, you had to pay at least 100 yuan, not to mention preparing good wine and fine cigarettes to treat her. Nowadays, 100 yuan is nothing, barely enough for a meal. But at that time, the salary of an ordinary worker was just a little over 1 yuan per day. So for my family, this was no small expense. But was money more important than the life of his grandson? Moreover, if the situation wasn't resolved, Ma Lao Tham's wife might continue to bring calamity upon my entire family. Early that morning, with 2 dark circles under his eyes, my father rushed to Tom Top Lee Street carrying money and gifts to invite Madame Liu. She was extremely hard to invite. Normally, not just anyone could ask her for help. My father pleaded endlessly before she finally agreed to come. But she added another condition. She would not walk. She had to ride a donkey cart. Helpless, my father had to spend a few more yuan to hire a cart to bring her to our home. Madame Liu was over 60 years old, her feet bound small, holding a long smoking pipe, and whenever she spoke, she always lifted her chin, as if she looked down on everyone. Although my grandfather felt somewhat displeased, he still maintained a respectful attitude, because he had heard that this old woman possessed very high spiritual cultivation, and had never failed in helping anyone. Madame Liu took a long drag from her pipe, let out a light hum through her nose, then slowly said, "Where is the child? Bring him out for me to see." Hearing that, my grandfather hurriedly told my mother to carry me out of the room. The moment she saw me, Madame Liu's expression immediately changed, as if she had seen something terrifying. Then, suddenly, thump,
she knelt heavily before me, her entire body trembling, saying, "This humble disciple of the spirit-invoking lineage of Tom-Top Lee, surname Liu, has served the household of the divine ancestor for 40 years. I have offended the honored presence of the Celestial One. I beg the Celestial One to forgive me." After saying that, she repeatedly kowtowed to me. This scene stunned my whole family. No one understood what was happening. We had worked so hard to invite her from so far away, yet she came in and immediately knelt before a 3-year-old child. As for me, still innocent, I found it amusing that an old woman was kowtowing to me, and burst out laughing. After the kowtows, Madame Liu remained kneeling, not daring to stand. My grandfather froze for a moment, then hurriedly tried to help her up, saying, "Madam, why are you being so formal? Why kneel before a child? Please stand up." But Madame Liu remained kneeling, not daring to lift her head, saying, "The Celestial One has not spoken. This disciple dare not rise." My grandfather, helpless, looked at me and said, "Tio Keep, tell her to stand up." I blinked and said, "Stand up." Hearing that, Madame Liu seemed relieved, trembling as she stood and stepped aside. My mother, still confused, hurriedly took me back into the room. Only after I went inside did Madame Liu sigh in relief, looking at my grandfather and father with a reproachful expression as she said, "You two, your household shelters such a powerful celestial spirit, yet you still went to invite me? Are you trying to embarrass me?" Celestial spirit? Our family has never set up a spirit hall. We don't even know which celestial spirit you're talking about, my grandfather said, sensing the weight of her words. Madame Liu explained, "Your grandson carries within him the presence of an immensely powerful celestial spirit, stronger than any I've ever encountered 100-fold. My own spiritual cultivation is nothing compared to his. I should leave immediately. Staying here will only make a fool of myself." As she spoke, she sighed and shook her head repeatedly. My grandmother anxiously said, "But he's only 3 years old. He doesn't know anything. If not for that, we wouldn't have begged you to come." These words made Madame Liu pause in suspicion. After thinking for a moment, she asked, "May I examine the child again?" "No problem, I'll call him," my father said. But before he could, Madame Liu quickly raised her hand to stop him, warning, "Don't call him. Let me go in myself. Do not disturb the celestial spirit." With her tiny bound steps, she walked into the house. As soon as she saw me, she maintained the same reverence, her wrinkled face blooming like a flower, saying, "Celestial One, allow this disciple to examine you. Please do not blame me." Then she suddenly placed her palm on the crown of my head and chanted incantations with closed eyes. Moments later, her whole body shook violently, and then she abruptly opened her eyes wide, stumbling backwards several steps before kneeling and kowtowing 3 loud thumbs, thud, 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 saying, "I beg the Celestial One not to punish this disciple for unintentionally offending you." Then she hurried out of the room in panic. My father and grandfather rushed after her. In the courtyard, they saw Madame Liu take out the 100 yuan my father had given her earlier, add another 100 yuan of her own, and hand it back, saying, "Brother, take this money back." My grandfather was stunned, thinking she no longer wanted to help us, and asked, "Madame Liu, what do you mean? Are you refusing to help us?" She replied, "It's not that I won't help. I dare not accept your money. Serving the Celestial One is a blessing accumulated over 8 lifetimes. How could I take money? Please take this back. Consider it a token of my respect." She spoke with utmost humility, no trace of the arrogance she had earlier. Then, under my grandfather's persistent questioning, she finally revealed the truth. From the first moment she saw me, she sensed an incredibly powerful celestial aura around me and assumed our family belonged to the spirit-invoking lineage. But after examining more closely, she realized that within me was the soul of a celestial spirit with extremely high cultivation, at least 1,000 years old.
However, that spirit was severely weakened, clearly gravely injured, and had not awakened. As a spirit-invoking practitioner, Madame Liu understood better than anyone how terrifyingly powerful such a soul was, which is why she dared not be careful and certainly dare not accept payment. Though she wouldn't take money, she swore solemnly that she would take responsibility for the affairs of the O family. And from this day forward, our matters were her matters. Even if it cost her life, she would ensure my safety. Hearing these words, my family finally understood why, from the moment I was born, countless golden weasels and foxes had come to kneel at our doorstep.
Chapter 7. The Fiend Awakes. The reason Madame Liu was willing to help my family was because she believed that the powerful celestial spirit soul within my body would sooner or later awaken, and when that happened, I would surely be able to repay her. And reality later proved that Madame Liu truly had far-sighted vision. I eventually saved her life once, though that was a story for later. After deciding to stay and help me, Madame Liu asked clearly about the feud between me and the wife of Ma Lao Tam. It turned out that that day the wife of Ma Lao Tam had beaten me and even stood at my doorway cursing viciously. Yet early the next morning, people discovered her corpse behind the mountain. The golden weasels and foxes all knew that a powerful celestial spirit soul resided within me, and when she laid hands on me, it was no different from offending a celestial being. So the weasels and foxes took action to avenge me. Afterward, my father wondered why the wife of Ma Lao Tam kept knocking on our window in the middle of the night, every time only saying one sentence before leaving, repeatedly letting out cold laughter. Madame Liu replied that it was because the wife of Ma Lao Tam had just died and was still a newly formed ghost whose cultivation was not high. Only after the 7th night would she become stronger, and by then she would be capable of killing our entire family. Furthermore, the resentment of the wife of Ma Lao Tam was immense, like a black mass of choking hatred pressed in her chest, and having been bitten by the fox immortal and the yellow weasel immortal, her corpse was extremely susceptible to change, turning into something terrifying called a corpse demon, a half-corpse, half-ghost abomination. Her corpse had not been stolen by anyone. She had broken out of her own coffin, and now no one knew where she was hiding. After the 7th night, the soul of the wife of Ma Lao Tam would merge with the corpse, transforming into a corpse demon to return for revenge. Hearing this, my whole family was horrified and urgently asked what to do next. Madame Liu said the simplest solution was to destroy her before the 7th night, whether it meant finding the corpse or dispersing her soul. As long as she was destroyed, she could not become a corpse demon. My grandfather said the matter was simple. Every night the wife of Ma Lao Tam came knocking on the window, so Madame Liu should just stay here, wait for her to appear, then strike and eliminate her to eradicate future danger. Madame Liu agreed. Before dealing with the wife of Ma Lao Tam, she told my father to find several things. First, a fully grown black dog with not a single hair of another color. Second, 3 roosters raised for at least 3 years with smooth, shiny feathers. Third, a burial shroud custom sewn for me, so that when the wife of Ma Lao Tam appeared, I could wear it to protect my life. The first 2 were easy because villagers kept dogs and chickens, but the third was difficult. Who would sell a funeral shroud for a 3-year-old child? It had to be custom made. With no choice, my father rushed to the mourning goods shop to order one. The fastest would be ready the next day. But Madame Liu said it was fine. The burial shroud was only a last resort safeguard. If the wife of Ma Lao Tam appeared merely in ghost form, she herself could handle everything. Everything was prepared. All that remained was to wait for the wife of Ma Lao Tam to come at midnight. However, to everyone's surprise, the entire family and Madame Liu stayed awake the whole night, eyes black like pandas, yet the wife of Ma Lao Tam did not appear. The roosters crowed around and daylight came. The black dog my father found had even returned to its nest to sleep. My grandfather, with dark circles under his eyes, asked why she hadn't come. Madame Liu was puzzled as well, pondering for a long time before saying perhaps her soul sent something, knowing this old woman was a spirit-invoking practitioner, so she did not dare come. Or perhaps last night she simply had no intention of appearing. It seems we could only wait until the day after tomorrow,
When she transformed into a corpse demon, then she would appear. My father anxiously asked if the corpse demon-formed wife of Ma Lao Tam would be too powerful for us to handle. Madame Liu sighed, saying there was no other choice, but they should rest assured, even if she had to risk her old life, she would protect the child. So Madame Liu stayed at our house waiting another night for the wife of Ma Lao Tam. Yet another night passed, and she still did not appear. The next day would be her 7th night, after which she would transform into a corpse demon, and no one knew what would happen. That entire day Madame Liu appeared uneasy, clearly very tense, and not only her, my parents and grandfather were extremely nervous as well. My grandfather even took out the large saber he once used in battle, sharpening it until it gleamed cold and bright. Dusk fell, and our family gathered to eat dinner, which might very well be everyone's last meal. After dark, Madame Liu told my father to take the black dog outside and only bring it back to the front door after midnight. Although he didn't understand why, he followed instructions. In the country, people slept early, and in those days our village had no electricity, let alone phones or TVs, so the nights were terrifyingly quiet. Around 9 p.m., the entire village fell silent, eerily so. Time passed minute by minute, second by second, and in a blink of an eye it was 11 p.m. My mother, though extremely frightened, could do nothing but hold me as I slept early. My grandfather placed a long bench in the middle of the courtyard, gripping the large saber whose blade was wrapped in a strip of red cloth, red like blood. My grandfather said his saber could suppress fiends because it had taken lives, many Japanese soldiers in fact. It was a killing blade, carrying murderous energy that demons and ghosts feared. My grandfather had long ceased to fear death, and tonight, no matter what, he would protect his grandson. Madame Liu stood in the courtyard holding her large smoking pipe, puffing continuously, smoke filling the air, but her eyes remained fixed at the gate. After 11 p.m. for a while longer, something strange happened. First, a wind rose in the courtyard. Not an ordinary wind, but a swirling black vortex, spinning endlessly. At the same time, the whole village seemed to erupt, as every dog howled madly. But only a few minutes later, everything abruptly fell silent again. The surroundings became chillingly cold. Sitting in the courtyard, my grandfather felt goosebumps all over his body. At that moment, from outside came heavy footsteps. Thud, 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 each step echoing, accompanied by a nauseating stench. Hearing the sound, Madame Liu immediately tensed up and lowered her voice. "It's here!"
Chapter 8. The 7th Night. No sooner had she finished speaking than a deafening boom erupted. The 2 thick wooden gates of the courtyard suddenly burst open, blown straight inward and shattering into pieces. Immediately after, a cold, eerie voice drifted in from outside the yard. "You all killed me. I want your whole family to pay with your lives." My grandfather and Madame Liu looked toward the entrance. Though they had mentally prepared themselves, the moment they saw the wife of Ma Lao Tam, both of them couldn't help but shudder. By now, her corpse already showed signs of decay, her entire body swollen, her eyes completely white, her mouth exposing 4 razor-sharp fangs, her twisted and ferocious face horrifying to behold. From her hands grew long blue-black claws over 10 centimeters each claw like a gleaming dagger. No ordinary person could remain calm seeing such a monstrous sight. The moment Madame Liu saw her, she immediately shouted, "Wife of Ma Lao Tam, I am Liu, a spirit-invoking disciple of Tom Thop Li Street. Today I am here to subdue you. You are dead and cannot return to life. I know you died unjustly, but the living walk their path, and the dead walk theirs. If you remain stubborn, then I must carry out heaven's will and destroy you. But if you obey, I can help you transcend and reincarnate sooner." The wife of Ma Lao Tam let out a guttural laugh, her already twisted face growing even vicious. "You want me to leave? Fine. Bring that brat Ngo Kiep out here. Tonight I must kill him." Before the words faded, she suddenly leapt, one single bound covering nearly 5 meters, her stiff legs unable to bend, landing with a heavy thud like a Jiangshi corpse walker. But Jiangshi have no human consciousness. They only kill and drink blood by instinct. Madame Liu said the wife of Ma Lam Tom was not a Jiangshi, but a corpse demon, a terrifying combination of soul and corpse, a demonic creature that retains consciousness and can speak like a living person. Seeing this abomination, Fear surged inside my grandfather, yet he still gripped the large blade in his hand and took 2 steps forward, shouting angrily, "If you want my grandson's life, you'll have to ask this blade first. Touch him, and today old Ngo will make you die a second time." Before the corpse demon could strike, a bizarre scene erupted in our courtyard. From all directions came faint rustling noises, chilling to the bone. Within moments, a swarm of golden weasels and foxes appeared. Some perched atop the courtyard wall, others climbing the roof, filling the yard with countless glowing green eyes. Among them, a massive golden weasel with a white streak running down its spine leapt over the fence, and without making a sound, charged straight at the corpse demon. This same white-streaked golden weasel had appeared the day her body was buried. At the same time, the rest of the golden weasels and foxes threw themselves at her like a crazed swarm of locusts, completely ignoring their own safety. "The golden great spirit has manifested," Madame Liu exclaimed, overwhelmed. But a heartbeat later, her face changed. Although the swarm piled on to the corpse demon, clinging to her body, she possessed terrifying strength. With just a few wild sweeps of her arms, she sent the golden weasels flying in all directions. She even grabbed one, tearing its hind legs apart, then opened her mouth and devoured it alive, fresh blood running down her chin in a horrifying red stream. Even the massive golden weasel with the white streak was flung aside, rolling several times across the ground. My grandfather almost vomited on the spot. Truly demonic. Though still covered in clawing weasels and foxes, the corpse demon moved with shocking speed. With a single leap, she shot toward the entrance of our house. Only a few more steps and she'd break inside. My grandfather roared, no longer thinking, and swung his blade down hard on the top of her skull. He thought this strike would shatter her head, but to his shock, her skull was as hard as stone. The blade bounced off instantly, numbing his entire arm. Though he couldn't cut through, the force of the blow still pushed her back several steps. She glanced at the blade in his hand, her nostrils flaring slightly, fear flickering across her face for the briefest moment before she roared in fury and charged again. This time, as she rushed forward, she opened her mouth and spewed a dense black miasma toward my grandfather. He didn't know what it was, but instinctively dodged aside. At that moment, Madame Liu suddenly raised her large smoking pipe. The pipe glowing red hot, she inhaled sharply and exhaled a thick cloud of smoke that collided with the black miasma, neutralizing it instantly. Madame Liu then swung the pipe hard, striking the corpse demon in the chest and knocking her back several steps. "Brother Ngo, get inside. This demon is too vicious. Release the roosters, now!" Madame Liu shouted while striking continuously. My grandfather, though worried for her safety, knew this was critical. He rushed into the house to fetch the roosters, but as soon as he turned back, he saw a terrifying sight. The eyes of Madame Liu had turned into a cold, eerie green, like a predator in the night. Only then did he understand. Madame Liu had begun invoking the celestial spirit, borrowing divine power to possess her body. Every mountain has its guardian. This house has its divine protector. You vile creatures dare act so boldly here. I, Liu, the insoluble envoy, am present. How dare you run wild? Her voice suddenly changed, becoming younger, clearer, like the voice of a young woman. In that instant, Madame Liu seemed like a completely different person. Her slightly stooped figure straightened, and the smoking pipe danced in her hand, each strike landing on the corpse demon's body, igniting a burst of bright spiritual flame. By then, my grandfather had released the 3 large roosters into the courtyard. No sooner had they entered than they crowed loudly. The corpse demon, locked in combat with Madame Liu, trembled violently the moment she heard their cries, panic flooding her face. She immediately turned and leapt toward the gate to escape, but right at that moment, Father Ngo appeared at the doorway.
Chapter 9. The Fox Spirit's Shadow. Father Ngo did not go alone. Beside him was a large black dog held on a leash, and the moment he appeared, the corpse demon, formerly the wife of Ma Lao Tom, lunged straight towards him. Seeing its grotesque face, Father Ngo was so terrified his legs trembled violently and he froze on the spot, unable to move. "Get out of the way!" Grandfather Ngo shouted when he saw his son standing there stunned, but Father Ngo was already scared stiff, his limbs turning to jelly, unable even to run. At that critical moment, the black dog he brought suddenly let out a fierce roar and leapt upward, more than 2 meters into the air, biting onto the corpse demon, yet still unable to bring it down. Taking advantage of the moment, the weasels and foxes also pounced, frantically biting and clawing, but the corpse demon's flesh was hard as steel. They could not pierce it, and could only cling to its body like living ornaments. Only one large golden weasel was actually effective. It charged in, grabbed both legs of the corpse demon, and yanked hard, pulling it to the ground.
"Get inside! Everyone hide inside!" Madame Liu shouted again, raising her smoking pipe and smashing it down onto the corpse demon's head. The wife of Ma Lao Tam immediately let out a mournful, piercing scream. At this moment, Father Ngo finally snapped out of his daze and hurried into the house. Grandfather Ngo rushing in right after him, running straight into the bedroom. My mother and I had been awakened by the chaos outside. Mother Ngo held me tightly, trembling with fear. Outside were ghastly screams mixed with the cries of roosters, foxes, dogs, and a terrifying cacophony that chilled the blood. When grandfather entered, still holding the large, worn war blade, my mother screamed in panic. "Tiao Qing, don't be afraid. Quickly put the burial shroud on the child. This is Madame Liu's instruction," grandfather reminded. My mother, terrified to the point her mind went blank, only snapped back to her senses upon hearing him and hurriedly tried to dress me in the shroud, but her hands trembled so badly she could barely manage it. Everything had turned chaotic. Father Ngo appearing like that had completely ruined the plan. Madame Liu had told him to find 3 roosters, so their crowing would frighten the corpse demon into fleeing. Roosters only crow at dawn, and corpse demons fear sunlight. If morning light touches them, they instantly melt into a puddle of bloody mist. Hearing roosters crow, the corpse demon thought dawn was coming, which is why it panicked and fled. Madame Liu realized the corpse demon was far stronger than she expected, so she wanted grandfather to release the roosters to scare it off before dealing with it again. Unexpectedly, the corpse demon really did flee, but Father Ngo happened to hear the commotion and brought the black dog to the doorway, blocking its escape route. The black dog was meant to block the exit, because black dogs carry strong yang energy, especially those with pure black fur. They cannot defeat a corpse demon, but they are never afraid of one. Madame Liu had prepared 2 backup plans. If she lost the fight, she would release the rooster to drive the corpse demon away, then reassess. If she could win, she would release the black dog to stop it from escaping. But things had become a mess, all because Madame Liu had not clearly explained when exactly to release the black dog. Just as my mother finally managed to dress me in the burial shroud, a heavy, pained groan echoed from the courtyard. It sounded like Madame Liu. Hearing the noise, grandfather immediately sensed something was wrong, grabbed his blade, and ran outside. But at that moment, beside the window, a massive shadow loomed. Before he could understand what was happening, a sharp cracking sound rang out as a hand with long razor-like claws smashed through the window and thrust directly into the room. Immediately after, the hideous face of the wife of Ma Lao Tam leaned in. Then she stomped hard and leapt straight into the room. My mother, timid by nature, nearly fainted the instant she saw that fanged face, screaming in despair. Grandfather was also terrified, but still forced himself to raise the war blade and slash at the corpse demon. But the corpse demon seemed prepared. It raised its arm, grabbed the blade mid-swing, and kicked grandfather violently, sending him flying and crashing onto the ground, the impact so hard his vision went dark and he could not stand. "No keep! No keep! I've come for you!" the wife of Ma Lao Tam snarled, her nostrils flaring, but then a flicker of doubt crossed her face. She couldn't sense my presence. Corpse demons cannot see, but they can sense the breath of the living, and she was more sensitive to my presence than anyone else. The reason Madame Liu had me wear a burial shroud was this exactly. Only the dead wear shrouds, and the fabric hides the young energy of the living. Before I wore it, she could still sense me, but the moment she entered the room, she could no longer feel me at all. "Three Sister, please spare my son. He is my only child," my mother cried, tears streaming down her face as she held me tightly. The wife of Ma Lao Tam kept sniffing the air, but still couldn't sense my yang energy. Enraged, her blood-white eyes swept towards my mother, and a twisted smile formed on her lips. "Mo Keep, come out now, or I'll kill your mother first," she hissed. And with that, her long black-green claws slashed towards my mother's neck. At 3 years old, I was still an innocent child who understood nothing. But just as those claws were about to touch my mother's throat, something strange happened. Under the dim light, a massive shadow suddenly appeared, a fox with 8 tails. In that instant, a deafening buzz exploded inside my head, and I lost consciousness. "Begone!" A thunderous voice roared from my mouth. It was the voice of a young woman. The moment that shout erupted, a dazzling beam of golden light blasted out from my body straight into the corpse demon's face. "Ah!" The corpse demon screamed in agony as it was hurled out the window.
Immediately after that, my eyes rolled back, my body convulsed, and I fainted in my mother's arms. My mother was so terrified, her soul almost left her body, completely unable to understand what had just happened.
Chapter 10. Lost One Eye. The corpse demon was knocked flying outside, staggering as it crawled up and lurched toward the courtyard gate. After only a few steps, a large smoking pipe suddenly smashed straight into the back of its head. Thud. The corpse demon fell forward onto the ground. Madame Liu quickly circled to the front, assuming a strange posture, her left foot firmly stomping the ground, her right foot placed atop the left, looking as though she were sitting in midair, her hand raising the smoking pipe before striking the corpse demon's head again. 1 strike to shake the soul, 2 strikes to scatter the spirit, 3 strikes to erase resentment. With each strike, the corpse demon shrieked miserably, its whole body shaking violently like someone suffering a seizure, and by the 3rd strike, it lay completely motionless. After finishing the 3 blows, Madame Liu collapsed to the ground, exhausted. Inside the house, Grandfather Ngo had been kicked hard by the corpse demon and struggled greatly just to get up. Hearing that everything outside had gone quiet, he rushed out to check and saw Madame Liu sitting on the ground panting heavily, beside her the corpse demon lying motionless. The courtyard was a complete ruin. Golden weasels and foxes lying everywhere. Even the big black dog my father had brought home had its belly ripped open by the corpse demon and lay dead in a pool of blood. The enormous golden weasel that had appeared earlier was also severely wounded, its body covered in blood. It silently looked at my grandfather once before limping away with the injured group of golden weasels and foxes. After 3 years living together, my grandfather no longer felt any fear or caution toward them. Throughout those 3 years, those golden weasels and foxes brought food and supplies to our home every day, and this time they even risked their lives to save us. Watching the giant golden weasel's retreating silhouette, my grandfather said gratefully, "Thank you, Huang Dai Tian." Naturally, Huang Dai Tian did not respond and quickly disappeared into the night. My grandfather turned to look at Madame Liu, and under the moonlight he was startled. Her already unattractive face now had a long tear from her forehead down to the corner of her mouth, and she seemed to have gone blind in one eye. "Madame Liu, are you all right?" my grandfather asked anxiously. Madame Liu grimaced, inhaled sharply, her voice trembling. "Still alive. That corpse demon." My grandfather glanced at the body on the ground, unable to hide his worry. "Don't worry. It's over. The soul of Ma Lao Tom's wife has been completely shattered by me. Without a soul, she can no longer become a corpse demon. In a while, just throw this body up the mountain behind the house, or return it to the Ma family for them to bury, and the matter will be settled." They had not even finished relaxing when a head suddenly poked out from the doorway. It was my father. He had heard the silence outside and peeked in. Seeing the chaotic scene, his face changed dramatically. "Come in. It's over," my grandfather called. "Something's wrong with TL Kiep. Come quickly," my mother's choked voice cried from inside. Hearing this, my grandfather, my father, and the limping Madame Liu immediately rushed indoors. "What happened?" my grandfather asked as soon as he entered, seeing me lying motionless in my mother's arms. Anxiously, he continued, "When Ma Lao Tom's wife rushed in earlier, I suddenly saw on the wall behind Tiao Kiep the shadow of a huge fox with 8 tails. The moment that shadow appeared, she jumped out the window. But Tiao Kiep fainted and won't wake up no matter how much we call him." "What on earth happened?" my mother cried. Hearing this, my grandfather and father panicked and rushed toward me. Madame Liu listened, then after a moment of silence waved her hand, saying, "It's all right. Just now the primal spirit of the celestial being within the child must have appeared to drive away the corpse demon. If the celestial being hadn't intervened, both mother and child would be dead.
Because the celestial spirit heavily injured the corpse demon, I had the chance to expel it. But the celestial spirit itself is already very weak, and appearing this time drained it further. It and the child share one body, two souls. Resting for a few days will be enough. At least 3 days, at most 7. The child will certainly wake up. Hearing this, my whole family finally sighed a relief, though there was still much to do. Uncle Ngo hurriedly found a cart to carry the corpse of Ma Lao Tom's wife up the mountain behind the house, to await morning before informing Ma Lao Tom to arrange the burial. No matter what, her body could not remain in the Ngo household, or it would cause unnecessary trouble. As for the dead golden weasels and foxes in the courtyard, Grandfather Ngo gathered them all, more than 30 of them, their fur glossy, and undoubtedly worth a lot of money. But since they had sacrificed their lives to save his grandson, how could he bear to sell them for money? He dug a large pit in a corner of the courtyard and buried them all. When everything was finally taken care of, dawn had begun to break. Mother Ngo helped bandage Madame Liu's wounds, while Grandfather went to the east side of the village to find a donkey cart to take Madame Liu to town for treatment. On the way, Grandfather Ngo could not stop thinking about her injuries. As he pulled the cart, he said, "Madam, our family has no relation to you, yet you lost an eye for our sake. The Ngo family truly doesn't know how to repay you. We feel endlessly guilty." Madame Liu only gave a faint smile, saying, "Brother Ngo, I already told you, I didn't help your family for repayment. Being able to assist the celestial being is a blessing I have accumulated over many lifetimes. Your grandson being chosen by the celestial being means he carries great destiny. His future is immeasurable. But his fate is extremely unusual. Throughout his life, he will face calamities every 3 years. Each time, either he dies or someone else dies in his place. Let me warn you, the greatest calamity of his life will come at age 9. If he survives it, his destiny will change greatly. But if he fails, this small life will end. Remember, on his 9th birthday, do not let him step outside the house." Grandfather Ngo frowned, confused. Why 9 years old? Didn't he also face a calamity at age 6? Madame Liu sighed. "The calamity at age 6 I could help with, but the calamity at age 9 I can do nothing. Everything will depend on his fate." After saying this, she took a long drag from her pipe, her eyes drifting toward the distant Kusan village, as though lost in thought. 3 days later, I woke up.
Chapter 11. The Calamity at 6 years old. The matter of Ma Lao Tom's wife finally ended. The next day, someone discovered her corpse dumped behind the mountain by Father Wu, but now the body no longer had the terrifying appearance of the previous night. Her fangs were gone, the sharp claws had disappeared, leaving only an ordinary corpse. Ma Lao Tom quietly buried his wife, and that night my house had shaken the entire village with cries of ghosts, howls of wolves, roosters crowing, dogs barking, all blending into an eerie, haunting scene. But no one in the village dared to come see because the sounds were too terrifying. Even Ma Lao Tom, though suspecting that his wife had gone to the Wu household that night, did not dare to ask, and thus the matter slowly faded into oblivion. 3 days later, I woke up but continued to suffer from high fever for many days, my whole body burning as I drifted in and out of consciousness, and my parents and grandfather were so frightened they didn't dare leave me for even half a step. During those feverish days, images of a beautiful white fox constantly appeared in my mind, curled up quietly, its body covered in pure white fur, especially the 8 long tails that occasionally swayed gently. Its eyes opened slightly, but looked extremely weak, as if its strength had been completely exhausted. Because of my persistent fever, my grandfather became increasingly worried and went all the way to the town hospital to ask Madame Liu what was happening to me. But she only reassured him that the celestial spirit inside me had always been very weak and needed to borrow my body to recuperate. This time, in order to save me, the celestial spirit was forced to appear, which damaged its vital energy. And since I was one with it, when its soul was injured, I also became weak.
but she said I would recover in a few days. My grandfather half believed, half doubted, but upon returning home things were exactly as she had said. After several days of high fever, I returned to normal. After this incident, for some reason, my craving for blood decreased significantly. I could eat other things and no longer depended so heavily on blood like before, which made my family extremely relieved. Everyone thought this was truly misfortune turning into blessing. When I was born, I looked extremely strange. My face resembled a fox, my whole body covered in white fur, and small fangs growing from my mouth. But now at 3 years old, all of those traits had disappeared, leaving only the habit of drinking blood. But now, even that had visibly improved. My parents and grandfather had no grand expectations for me. They only hoped I could grow up healthy and survive in peace. But deep down they always carried fear, because from Wu Ben Tian to Madame Lu, everyone said I was the bearer of calamity, a person destined for a disaster every 3 years. Either I died or someone else died. That prediction was like a curse hovering over our family. It must also be mentioned that after Ma Lao Tom's wife was eliminated, the foxes and Hongbi-2 golden martens continued to bring offerings to my house at night, although not as frequently as before, perhaps because I no longer thirsted for blood so intensely and they didn't need to offer as much. After I turned 3, everything gradually became normal. I was like any other child, healthy and growing day by day. But in the eyes of the villagers, I was still a strange, eerie kid, and no children wanted to play with me, which made me very lonely. 3 more years passed in a blink, and I was 6. By then, I was a sensible child who could help with chores, and seeing how normal I seemed, my family thought I had escaped the destined calamity. Especially because, as my 6th birthday approached, I had completely stopped drinking blood and ate like any regular person. Whenever my parents went to the fields, they took me with them because they didn't feel safe leaving me alone. Every time this happened, foxes and Hongbi-2 golden martens would appear from nowhere and surround me. In my village, people feared these creatures greatly, believing them to be spiritual beings, so everyone stayed far away and no one dared provoke them. But I was not afraid. On the contrary, I felt strangely close to them, and they never avoided me, instead forming a circle around me. I could freely touch them and play with them, and even if I accidentally hurt them, they never bared their fangs or fought back. Only when my parents returned did they quickly scatter. These foxes and martens were my closest friends during childhood. Although I had appeared completely normal for 3 years, my grandfather still worried constantly about the prophecy, every 3 years a calamity. Before my 6th birthday, he personally went to Tom Sop Lee Street to invite Madame Lu to help me overcome this disaster. In truth, my family had never cut ties with Madame Lu. During every holiday, my parents brought gifts to visit her, for she had saved our family, but lost one of her eyes because of it. She lived alone, with no husband or children. She once had children, more than one, but all died young before turning 3. Because she had saved us, my grandfather told my parents to treat her like their own mother and be filial to her. Tomorrow was my 6th birthday, and afraid something might happen, my grandfather went to invite Madame Lu so everything would be ready. But unexpectedly, the moment he left, trouble came to our house. The cause originated from the Trong family in the village, a wealthy family with 5 brothers. The youngest, Trong Lao U, was preparing to marry and wanted to build a new house, so he shamelessly occupied the small plot of land my family used to grow vegetables without even informing us. When my father heard this, he became furious and confronted Trong Lao U to reason with him, but the two sides could not agree, words turned heated, and eventually it led to a fight. Although Trong Lao U was young and strong, he was no match for my father. My grandfather had been a soldier and taught my father some martial arts, so Trong Lao U was beaten and humiliated. That afternoon, he dragged all 4 of his older brothers to our house to seek revenge. A fight broke out in our courtyard. People say 2 fists can't beat 4 hands, let alone 5 brothers against 1 man. Soon my father was knocked to the ground. Trong Lao U was the cruelest. He swung a heavy iron hoe that nearly snapped its handle on my father's head. My mother rushed in to stop him, but was shoved to the ground, left helpless and crying. At that moment, I, a 6-year-old child, saw my father being beaten. My mind burned with rage, and I rushed forward, hugging Trong Lao U's leg and biting down hard. "Ow!" Trong Lao U screamed in pain, cursing, "You little freak," before slapping me across the face, sending me tumbling. My face burned, but in that instant, I suddenly saw on the courtyard wall several golden martens and foxes appear, their green eyes filled with murderous intent as they stared at Trong Lao U, the scene exactly like the time Ma Lao Tom's wife hit me. My father, his head covered in blood, saw his son struck, and fury surged through him. He crawled up like a madman, rushed into the house, and grabbed my grandfather's large knife.
Chapter 12. Earthen Dog and White Geese. My father rushed out from inside the house, his eyes bloodshot, his head covered in blood, but the blade in his hand gleamed coldly, radiating a murderous aura that suffocated everyone around. "You dare lay a hand on my wife and child? I'll chop every last one of you to death." No matter how gentle a man is, when he sees his wife and child being bullied, no one can hold back. Seeing my father filled with killing intent, the 5 Trung brothers instantly turned pale, losing all the earlier arrogance, and immediately ran away. My father chased after them with the knife, but when he reached the doorway, my mother hugged him tightly from behind, holding him back. In truth, my father no longer had much strength left. He had been beaten so badly that his head was split open, his body covered in wounds. After struggling for a while, he finally ran out of energy, and the blade slipped from his hand onto the ground. My mother didn't dare let him chase after them. If he lost control and actually killed someone, the consequences would be disastrous. After that, she supported him back into the house and simply bandaged his wounds. Not long after, my grandfather returned, bringing Madame Liu along. The moment they stepped into the yard and saw the chaotic scene, then saw my father beaten to such a state, my grandfather's anger instantly erupted like wildfire. Compared to my father, my grandfather's temper was even more explosive. If he had been home earlier, the Trung brothers would never have dared to come and cause trouble. Everyone in the village knew my grandfather had served in the military, had been on the battlefield, and possessed a frighteningly tough personality. When he grabbed his saber, preparing to go settle the score with the Trung family, Madame Liu suddenly called out to him. She wasn't looking at him. Her gaze was fixed on my face, where the swelling from a slap was still clearly visible. "Wu Lao Ka, don't go," Madame Liu said slowly. "Even if you don't look for them, the Trung family will still face disaster." My grandfather froze and frowned. "What do you mean?" "What else could it be?" she sighed, clicking her tongue. "Anyone who dares harm your grandson is doomed to misfortune." Hearing everything from my mother, my grandfather grew even angrier. He gritted his teeth and roared, "Those bastards! Beating a 6-year-old child! Do they have any humanity left? No, I must go demand an answer." Madame Liu waved her hand sternly. "Wu, listen to me! Do not go! If you go, things will only get worse. The one who hit your grandson will not live past tonight." My grandfather was shocked and hurriedly asked why. Madame Liu reminded him of the wife of Ma Lao Tom, how she kicked me a few times, and the next morning her body was found dead on the mountain. This time, she continued, the Trung family chose the exact day of the boy's calamity to come cause trouble. Isn't that just asking for death? The spirit soul inside the child is extremely powerful. For 6 years, he has been protected by golden weasels and fox spirits. Harming him is no different than insulting the celestial being within him. The golden weasels and fox spirits will not spare the Trung family. My grandfather shuddered. He knew the Trung family was at fault, but could one slap really cost a man's life? They were still villagers. He didn't want the matter to escalate too far. He asked if there was a way to resolve it. Madame Liu shook her head and sighed. "There is no way. Wu Keep's fate is destined for hardship. Every 3 years, a calamity, unavoidable. When the calamity arrives, either he dies or someone else dies in his place. Now it depends on whether the Trung family has enough fate to survive." Hearing that, my grandfather grew even more anxious. After a moment of hesitation, he asked, "You mean whoever hit him will die, correct?" Madame Liu nodded. My grandfather turned to my mother. "Who hit the boy?" My mother answered, "It was Trung Lao 5. My grandfather fell silent for a long moment and then asked Madame Liu, "Is there any way to help the Trung family? Even if we can't save them, at least warn them?" Madame Liu sighed helplessly. "The ones seeking revenge will be the golden weasels and fox spirits. Tonight they will go after Lao 5.
If you truly want to help him, tell him to follow my instructions. Release many earthen dogs into the yard. Do not tie them up. In the bedroom, raise several white geese. Before releasing them, feed them until they are full, so they will defecate all over the house. Only then will Lao 5 have a chance of surviving this calamity. It sounded strange, but it actually had a basis. First, earthen dogs in the countryside are extremely alert and excellent at guarding homes. If they detect a golden weasel sneaking in, they will attack unrelentingly. In terms of size and strength, golden weasels are no match for dogs and will be easily overwhelmed. Second, white geese are highly territorial and even more aggressive than dogs. Many guard dogs fear white geese, let alone weasels. Most importantly, golden weasels are terrified of white goose droppings. If they accidentally step in it, their paws will soon rot. In truth, Madame Liu did not want to reveal any of this. As a spirit-invoking disciple, golden weasels and foxes were divine beings, and offending them was something she dared not do. But seeing my grandfather persistently begging, she reluctantly shared the method. Even so, she could not guarantee that Lao 5 would survive. The golden weasels and foxes had immense gratitude towards the Oni family. Without them, we wouldn't have survived until now. But lives were lives. My grandfather, soft-hearted despite everything, could not bear to watch a villager die. He had watched all 5 Trung brothers grow up. Although they had bullied my family before, it was never to the extent of deserving death for a slap. Even if the method might not work, grandfather still wanted to warn Lao 5. So, before nightfall, he quietly went to Lao 5's house. When he arrived, he found the door tightly shut. He knocked for a long time, but no one answered. In truth, Lao 5 was inside. He knew grandfather would come, and in fear, he didn't open the door. Grandfather couldn't break the door down, of course. All 5 Trung brothers grew up under his watch, and grandfather was a respected figure in the village. None of them dared face him head-on. Lao 5 had acted out of impulsive anger, and now he deeply regretted it. He feared grandfather's saber even more. Grandfather then went to look for the other Trung brothers, but some were too scared to show themselves, some hid elsewhere, and one even asked his wife to apologize on his behalf. After going through everyone, grandfather still couldn't meet any of them. He could only sigh, shaking his head helplessly. Perhaps this truly is Lao 5's fate. The next morning, Trung Lao Dai discovered his younger brother dead inside the house, hanging from the roof beam.
Chapter 13. Die and Live Again. Last night my grandfather went to meet the 5 brothers of the Trung family to remind them, telling Trung Lao U to raise some dogs and white geese at home to guard against fox spirits and Wang Bi TZ seeking revenge. But those people thought my grandfather wanted to take revenge on behalf of my father, so they were so terrified that they did not dare leave their house. Early the next morning, Trung Lao Dai planned to visit Trung Lao U to discuss whether they should go to my house together to apologize to my father or not. Since, after all, we were people of the same village, and the brothers realized they had been wrong. In the future, they would still have to see each other, so they shouldn't let this become an irreparable crack. But when he pushed open the door of Trung Lao U's house, the scene before him shocked him so much that he collapsed to the ground. When the door opened, he saw Trung Lao U hanging by the neck from the roof beam, his body swaying gently with every breeze. Trung Lao U had died in a horrifyingly strange manner, his tongue sticking out long, his eyes bulging wide with blood-red whites, his face pale but gradually turning a deep purple. What was even more terrifying was the eerie smile on his face, the corners of his lips slightly raised. That smile was identical to the one of the wife of Ma Lao Tam when she died. At a single glance, Trung Lao Dai was so terrified he ran out in a panic, screaming for the villagers. When everyone rushed to Trung Lao U's house, an even more terrifying scene appeared. On the roof beam, there wasn't only Trung Lao U. Not far from him hung a Wang Bi TZ, its body suspended beside him, the 2 corpses almost parallel. This Wang Bi TZ had sacrificed its own life in exchange for the life of Trung Lao U.
The villagers, upon seeing this, were horrified, and gathered in clusters, whispering anxiously, but no one dared step forward to cut the body down. In my hometown, Huang Btz are called Huang Tian, sacred spirits that everyone respects. Now that a Huang Tian had personally taken a life, who would dare touch its corpse? If they weren't careful, they might meet the same fate as Trung Lao U. Hearing the news, my grandfather immediately brought Madame Lu to take a look. The moment she saw the Huang Btz hanging from the beam, Madame Lu's expression changed drastically, fear flashing in her eyes. This is bad. Something big is about to happen. My grandfather looked at Trung Lao U's still hanging corpse, swept his gaze across the crowd, and said coldly, "So many people here, and none of you dare take him down? Leaving him hanging like this, what kind of sight is that?" But even with my grandfather scolding them, no one dared move. Seeing this, my grandfather had no choice but to move himself, pulling a chair over, climbing up, and removing Trung Lao U's body. Someone brought a blanket, and my grandfather gently laid the stiff corpse onto it. By now, the brothers of the Trung family had all arrived, and when they saw Grandfather Ong-O, Trung Lao Ne Ai, the most hot-tempered among them, stepped forward, pointed straight at my grandfather's face, and shouted, "Old Ong-O, stop pretending to be kind. Everyone knows Lao U was killed by your family. Who doesn't know your family gave birth to a monster? Your daughter-in-law slept with a Huang Btz and gave birth to that freak. Every night golden foxes and weasels bring things to your house. My brothers only beat your son a little, and your family sent those golden weasels to kill my younger brother, didn't you?" As soon as he finished, the other Trung brothers also stepped forward, shouting and accusing my grandfather. My grandfather's face darkened immediately, his voice booming with authority as he glared at the brothers and said, "You shameless bastards! When I wasn't home, you all ganged up to bully my family. You didn't just beat my son, you even laid hands on my daughter-in-law and my grandson. Your own younger brother hung himself from the roof beam, and you didn't care. I helped you take him down, and now you stand here barking at me? Are you planning to lay a hand on old Ong-O? Come here, then. I'd like to see if any of you have the guts." As he spoke, he narrowed his eyes, his cold gaze sweeping over them like a blade, killing intent radiating from him. He was a man of immense presence, and once he was angry, his aura was terrifying. The Trung brothers shrank back under his stare, none daring to speak. At this moment, Madame Lu stepped forward and said calmly, "Enough, stop talking. The dead come first. Take care of the funeral. Trung Lao U was not killed by the Ong-O family, but because you offended the Huang Btz. This disaster is your own doing. Let this matter end here." Madame Lu was highly respected in the region, known as one of the most skilled spirit-invoking shamans. Hearing her words, even if they wanted to argue, the Trung brothers didn't dare. Yet Trung Lao Ne Ai still couldn't swallow his anger. He glared at the roof beam where the golden weasel's corpse still hung, and suddenly did something no one expected. He dragged out an iron hoe from behind the door and violently smashed the corpse of the golden weasel, knocking it to the ground. Even after it fell, he kept hacking at it with the hoe, violently smashing the weasel's corpse again and again while gritting his teeth, shouting, "This damned weasel killed my brother, I'll smash it to pieces." After several blows, the golden weasel's body was crushed into a bloody mess. At this point, even if Madame Lu wanted to stop him, it was too late. She could only sigh and shake her head regretfully. My grandfather returned home fuming, with Madame Lu following close behind. On the way, she kept smoking from her long pipe, her expression dark. Once inside the house, she sat down and sighed, "Tien Yer, such is destiny. Every 3 years comes a calamity. If he doesn't die, someone else will die, and this time the omen has come true. But it's not over yet. The Trung family is about to face disaster." My grandfather, still angry, was startled by her words and asked, "Lao U is already dead. What more could happen to the Trung family?" Madame Lu shook her head wearily. "I cannot say for sure. Who can understand the will of the Huang Btz? But one thing I am certain of, Trung Lao Ne Ai has gravely offended the corpse of the Huang Btz today. He will definitely face a great calamity." My grandfather frowned, worry filling his voice. "This still isn't over?
Then what about my grandson? Will anything happen to him? Madame Lu took a slow drag from her pipe, her eyes dim. I am not sure either. We can only wait and see. Unexpectedly, her words came true. That very night, something terrifying happened. Trung Lao U's corpse, which had not yet been placed in the coffin and was still lying on the bed, suddenly sat upright. He had come back to life, and the sight nearly drove the Trung brothers insane.
Chapter 14. Huang's second master possesses the corpse. My grandfather left. The brothers of the Chong family gathered in Zhang Lao Wu's room to discuss his funeral arrangements. Besides the four brothers, their wives were also present, filling the room with people yelling and arguing, each unwilling to spend money on the burial. Just as the quarrel reached its peak, a strange, eerie laugh suddenly echoed from where Zhang Lao Wu's body lay. At first, everyone ignored it, thinking it was just a stray cat crying in the yard. But when the wife of Zhang Lao happened to glance toward the bed where the corpse lay, she suddenly screamed in terror and staggered backward several steps before falling to the ground. "What's wrong with you?" Zhang Lao asked in shock, and his wife pointed at the bed, voice trembling. "Lao Wu, he's alive again!" Everyone froze and turned toward where she was pointing, and the sight before them made their blood run cold. Sitting upright on the bed where his corpse had been laid was Zhang Lao Wu. While everyone had been arguing, none of them had noticed when he had sat up. He sat cross-legged on the bed, his face pale greenish-gray, his lips purple, his eyes rolled back showing only whites staring fixedly at the people in the room, while the corners of his mouth curled into a strange grin, letting out an eerie laugh that sounded no different than an owl crying in the night. The room instantly erupted in screams as everyone scrambled to run, shoving and tripping over one another, the women so terrified they nearly wet themselves. Only now did they remember that earlier my grandfather and Madame Liu had come during the day. No one was thinking about their previous grudges anymore. Zhang Lao Da ran straight to my house, shouting in a trembling, almost crying voice, "Uncle, uncle, please come quickly. Lao Wu came back to life." His whole body was shaking, as if only kneeling down to beg was missing. My grandfather was utterly shocked. He hung himself for half a day. When I took him down, his body was stiff as a board. How could he come back to life? "I don't know either, uncle. Madame Liu is at your house. Come see quickly." Zhang Lao Da pleaded desperately. My grandfather glanced at Madame Liu and said heavily, "Sister, looks like you were right. Something else has happened." Madame Liu's face darkened, and she said immediately, "Let's go see." Zhang Lao Da bowed repeatedly and led them back. As they approached the Chong family's courtyard, my grandfather saw all the Chong brothers standing outside, their wives sitting in a corner crying uncontrollably, clearly still traumatized. Zhang Lao Da, panic-stricken, urged, "Uncle, Madame Liu, please go inside. Lao Wu is still sitting on the bed." No sooner had he finished speaking than another eerie laugh echoed from inside the house, long and chilling like an owl calling in the night. Even someone as fearless as my grandfather felt goosebumps rising all over him. He looked at Zhang Lao Da, who immediately backed away in terror, afraid my grandfather would drag him inside. "It's Lao Wu's laughing. I won't go in, uncle. Please, you go." My grandfather snapped, "He's your own brother. You think he's going to harm you? Stop being ridiculous. Please, uncle, spare me. I really can't go in." Zhang Lao Da shook violently, waving his hands in refusal. With no choice, my grandfather and Madame Liu stepped inside. The moment they entered the room, they saw Zhang Lao Wu sitting on the bed, motionless, legs folded, his mouth twisted in a ghastly grin, his eyes rolled white, staring unblinkingly at them. When Zhang Lao Da said his younger brother had come back to life, my grandfather didn't believe him, but now seeing it with his own eyes, he could not deny it. The shock made his heart pound as he turned to Madame Liu and whispered, "Sister, you understand these things best. Tell me how we should handle this." Madame Liu narrowed her eyes at Zhang Lao Wu, whose complexion was ghostly and unnatural. Her voice sank low. "He is not alive again. He has been possessed by Huang's second master." As soon as she finished speaking, Zhang Lao Wu, or rather Huang's second master inside him, suddenly let out another eerie laugh, his body swaying slightly. Madame Liu immediately stepped forward and spoke respectfully. "This humble Liu, disciple of the spirit-invoking lineage of Tam Sap Li Street, greets Huang's second master.
You have taken the life of Zhang Lao Wu. Do you still need to torment his body further? Huang's second master was the respectful title used for a fully cultivated Huang Bizi spirit. Among the 5 great spirit-invoking lineages, Fox, Huang, White, Willow, and Earth, Huang Bizi ranked second, thus the title Huang's second master. After she finished speaking, Zhang Lao Wu, or rather Huang's second master inside him, suddenly spoke, his voice extremely strange, as if something was forcing its way out of his throat. "Liu woman, I know you have some skills, but I advise you not to meddle. The Chong family offended the ancestors. Killing Zhang Lao Wu alone is not enough. I want their entire household to know no peace. If you dare stop me, you'll bring disaster upon yourself." Hearing this, my grandfather instantly understood what was happening. He slowly stepped forward and gently said, "Huang's second master, I know you act out of concern for little Tio Kep. Our Ua family will always remember your great kindness. But even if the Chong family is at fault, they do not deserve to lose their lives. Please, grant them a chance to live." But Huang's second master glared, his eyes cold as ice sweeping across my grandfather, and he sneered, "Old Wu, our ancestors and yours have some karmic ties, so I do not wish to harm you. But do not mistake that for fear. Get out. This has nothing to do with you. Don't meddle." My grandfather sighed helplessly and was about to speak further when Madame Liu quickly pulled him back and whispered, "Brother Wu, step aside. Let me handle this." She was genuinely afraid my grandfather might anger Huang's second master. Although the celestial spirit resided in me, there was no direct connection between my grandfather and Huang's second master. If he provoked him, he might be killed instantly. Seeing her insist, my grandfather stepped aside. Madame Liu respectfully said again, "Huang's second master, I know the Chong family offended you. Since you have already punished them, please give a condition. If it is within our ability, we will certainly fulfill it." Huang's second master's lips curled in a ghastly smile as he slowly said, "First, bring me a few roosters to taste." Hearing the strange request, my grandfather was stunned.
Chapter 15. The Dead Asking for Food. In my grandfather's heart, 100 tangled thoughts churned. He could not deny that our No family owed a great debt to the Huangbi too. Without them, I might not have died long ago, let alone the disasters throughout my life. Just the famine alone would have been enough to keep me from surviving to this day. But the Trong brothers were children my grandfather had watched grow up, and when they were young, they used to chirp around him, calling him uncle. Even if Trong Lang Wu slapped me once, it wasn't anything serious. Just a simple apology would have resolved it, because after all, we lived in the same village, and sooner or later would still see each other. But now, just because of a single slap, he had lost his life. And moreover, the Huangbi too not only took his life, but refused to let go of his corpse and continued to torment it. But then again, Trong Lao Ni had destroyed the body of the golden weasel, which counted as retaliation. The dead are the most important. This was natural logic. In my grandfather's eyes, a human life was still more precious than that of a golden weasel. While my grandfather was lamenting noisily, Madame Liu hurriedly said, "Brother Nu, tell the Trong family to bring a few chickens here." My grandfather scowled. "What if after eating chickens it demands something else?" "Don't worry, I have a way." Madame Liu blinked her one eye, her tone mysterious. My grandfather, helpless, went out to the courtyard and told the Trong family. Trong Lao Dai immediately ran home to catch several chickens and brought them over. As a spirit-invoking discipline, Madame Liu was no stranger to golden weasels. Among the 5 celestial families, the golden weasel was the most mysterious. In fact, she had encountered many cases of people being possessed by golden weasels. In our rural area, the phenomenon of golden weasels entering bodies was not rare, especially during funeral vigils when someone had died. The family members must stay awake all night to guard the corpse, preventing fur-bearing animals from approaching, because this could easily lead to tra-si, the phenomenon of corpses moving. Tra-si didn't mean the dead turned into hopping zombies like in movies, but rather that a creature, usually a golden weasel, entered the corpse and controlled it, forcing the living to meet its demands.
When a golden weasel possesses a corpse, it would make the dead body sit upright on the coffin and speak its demands. If the family did not comply, it would cause the corpse to roll on the ground, refusing to lie still and creating endless disturbances, extremely hard to deal with. Whenever such things occurred, people in the area always invited Madame Liu to expel the golden weasel. When a golden weasel possesses a corpse, force must never be used. If someone acted like my grandfather, charging forward and slapping it, it would not drive it away, but instead provoke it to use the corpse to attack the living, causing serious consequences. When confronted with this situation, and before a spirit-invoking discipline arrived, the family could only plead softly and try to fulfill all the golden weasel's demands. Usually, golden weasels only demanded food. They liked chicken, duck, and other poultry. If they were fed well, they would leave on their own, and the corpse would lie down normally again. However, some exceptions existed, like the golden weasel before us. Its goal was not merely to demand food. What it wanted was to ensure the Trong family would never know peace again, causing their family to fall apart and their home to be ruined. For this kind of golden weasel, a spirit-invoking discipline had to negotiate. These negotiations were no different than haggling in a market, bargaining bit by bit. While negotiating, the spirit-invoking discipline had to observe the golden weasel's cultivation level to find a way to counter it. So how could one deduce its strength? This could be inferred from the things it demanded. Golden weasels with high cultivation demanded valuable items. Some even asked for old ginseng or rare herbs because these strengthened their spiritual power. Those with lower cultivation usually only demanded food, live chickens, live ducks, or even fresh fish. The lowest-ranked golden weasels could not even speak clearly and could only mimic the sounds of what they wanted. For example, if it wanted to eat hens, it would repeatedly cluck, 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 allowing people to guess its desire. Generally, the lower the rank of the golden weasel, the harder it was for it to express itself. It could only use sounds or gestures to indicate what it wanted, and whether people understood or not depended on their ability. The golden weasel possessing Trong Long Wu made it difficult for Madame Liu to determine its cultivation level. She decided to temporarily satisfy its demands to see if she could resolve the situation. Madame Liu worshipped the snake immortal, a serpent who had cultivated into a spirit, so she was not particularly afraid of golden weasels. Shortly after, Trong Lao Dai brought the chickens but dared not step inside. My grandfather had to carry the chickens to Madame Liu. He did not leave, curious to see what she would do next, but the scene that followed nearly made him vomit. Madame Liu took the chickens and handed them directly to Trong Long Wu, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed. "Huang Ni Ya, the chickens are here. Eat to your fill. Then can you leave?" she said as she tossed the chickens on the bed. Trong Long Wu grinned strangely. "Heh, I'll eat first, then we'll talk." And he grabbed a struggling hen and directly bit deep into its neck. With one bite, blood gushed out, and he drank greedily. The sight made my grandfather's spine turn cold, his stomach twist. He had been on battlefields and seen countless bloody killings, but watching a dead man come alive and eat a live chicken raw still made his hair stand on end. In moments, the chicken was devoured completely, without leaving a trace. Then he grabbed another chicken and continued tearing it apart. Madame Liu, meanwhile, lit her smoking pipe and sat silently with her face dark and unreadable. A golden weasel that entered a corpse and demanded food while also being able to speak indicated its cultivation wasn't high. While Trong Long Wu was engrossed in eating, Madame Liu prepared to strike. She took several final deep drags on her pipe, then suddenly stood up and blew a stream of smoke straight into his face. The very next moment, she raised the pipe and struck his forehead violently. "Ai!" Trong Long Wu cried out, his body convulsing intensely. Without hesitation, Madame Liu darted forward and gripped his neck tightly, her eyes turning an eerie green, her tone mesmerizing. "Huang Ni Ya, how dare you remain here? Get out now!" Her voice suddenly transformed into that of a young woman. Trong Long Wu, being choked, rolled his eyes white and spasmed violently like someone in the throes of epilepsy, screaming, "I won't go! I won't go! If you won't go, then I'll send you on your way."
Madame Lu smeared ash from her pipe on his forehead and drew a strange symbol.
Chapter 16. Old Fifth Goes Mad. In just an instant, a talisman drawn with pipe ash appeared on the forehead of Shang Lao Wu. Madame Lu suddenly raised her hand and struck hard on the top of his head. Shang Lao Wu's entire body convulsed once and then collapsed heavily onto the bed, completely motionless, returning to the appearance of an ordinary corpse. At the same time, Madame Lu's green eyes gradually returned to normal. She exhaled a long breath, relaxed her hand, and stepped back a few steps. My grandfather hurried forward to check Shang Lao Wu's body and cautiously asked, "Has it left?" Madame Lu nodded. "I've expelled it already, Brother Nu. Call the members of the Shang family inside." My grandfather immediately went out and told the Shang brothers to come into the house, but after witnessing what had just happened, none of them had the courage to step in. Seeing Shang Lao Wu lying motionless on the bed, their brothers finally let out a small sigh of relief. "We can't keep the body in the house too long. It's best to bury him tomorrow morning. Tonight, the Huangbi spirits probably won't disturb his corpse anymore. But all of you must be careful. They may come seeking trouble with you. Especially you, Lao Ni." Madame Lu cast a cold glance at Zhang Lao Ni and said sternly, "Earlier today, you smashed the head of that Huangbi creature with a metal shovel. They will not let that go easily." Hearing that, Zhang Lao Ni trembled violently and stammered in panic, "Why? That Huangbi creature killed my brother. Am I not even allowed to be angry and hit its corpse? You know Huangbi creatures have spiritual awareness, yet you still dared touch its body? If it wasn't for you, would Lao Wu have been possessed by it?" My grandfather scolded in a low, heavy voice. Hearing this, Zhang Lao Ni lowered his head, not daring to say another word. "No one can know what Huangbi creatures think, but you all know well how vengeful they are. Since you have offended them, I fear your whole family will not have peace," Madame Lu said slowly. Then turned to look at the Zhang family members. "I will stay at Brother Nu's house for a few days. If anything happens, you may come find me, but I don't work for free. This matter requires proper payment. Gather what you can and give it." The Zhang brothers, though unwilling, had no other choice, and scraped together 100 yuan to give Madame Lu. According to the rules of spirit invokers, one cannot handle matters for others without taking payment. The new family might be an exception, but outsiders were not. After settling Zhang Lao Wu's matter, Madame Lu and my grandfather returned. Before leaving, Madame Lu instructed Zhang Lao Ni to raise more dogs and keep a few white geese in the house. Zhang Lao Ni quickly agreed, but even so, Madame Lu still felt that this matter was far from over, so she decided to stay at my home a few more days until I survived this calamity. Unexpectedly, that very night, something happened. Around midnight, close to 12 o'clock, a terrifying scream echoed through the village, loud enough for half the village to hear. My whole family jolted awake in shock. A few minutes later, urgent knocking pounded on our gate. My grandfather hurried to open it and saw Zhang Lao Ni's wife standing there, her body trembling violently, her voice choked with fear. "Uncle, please call Madame Lu to our house quickly. Lao Ni has gone mad. He must have been haunted by the Huangbi creature." Hearing this, my grandfather rushed to wake Madame Lu. She had already been awakened by the scream, and when my grandfather arrived, she said nothing, simply followed Zhang Lao Ni's wife immediately to the Zhang household. My grandfather also brought along his large saber, worry filling his heart. Could it be that another person from the Zhang family would die, all because of a slap given to my grandson? Did the Huangbi creature truly want to take 2 lives? Wasn't that far too excessive? When they stepped into the courtyard of Zhang Lao Ni's house, both my grandfather and Madame Lu froze. The scene before them was utter chaos. The house was a mess, blood splattered across walls and ground, several chickens not yet fully dead were still twitching weakly on the ground. And Zhang Lao Ni? He was shirtless, standing in the middle of the courtyard, clutching a hen with both hands, his mouth biting deep into its neck, crazily sucking its blood. Beside him lay a long-dead Huangbi creature, its head smashed flat. Seeing my grandfather and Madame Lu, Zhang Lao Ni showed no fear. In fact, he narrowed his red eyes and glared fiercely at them. His face was covered in chicken blood, his twisted expression full of ferocity.
He slowly dropped the half-drained chicken, his throat producing strange guttural sounds, then suddenly dropped onto all fours, crawling towards my grandfather and Madame Lu in a grotesque animal-like posture. "Zhang Laoni, if you take one more step, I'll cut you down right here," my grandfather shouted, raising the gleaming large saber, killing intent blazing in his eyes. Whether it was because of the big knife in my grandfather's hand or something else, Zhang Laoni seemed to be suppressed. He remained crawling on the ground, issuing eerie noises but not daring to move forward. Behind him, his wife stood pale as a ghost, tears streaming down her face. My grandfather frowned and asked, "Sister-in-law, what on earth happened?" Her voice trembled. "In the middle of the night, we were sleeping when we heard the chicken screaming and flapping wildly outside. Laoni got up to check, then he saw that all the chickens in the coop had been bitten to death, and a huge golden-furred mink was standing in the courtyard, staring right at him. Laoni got angry, grabbed the hoe, and struck it dead, but right after that, he suddenly went insane, screaming madly. I panicked and ran to call the neighbors." After hearing this, Madame Lu let out a long sigh and said in a deep voice, "That mink came to exchange its life for Zhang Laoni's. Once it's done tormenting him, he will not survive." Hearing that, my grandfather's face darkened with rage. He slammed the knife into the ground and strode toward Zhang Laoni. Strangely, Zhang Laoni did not flee. He simply stared at my grandfather with a twisted, sinister grin. My grandfather said nothing, grabbed him by the hair and slapped him hard several times, shouting, "Golden Mink, stop tormenting him. Lao Nu here is not afraid of you. Just for a single slap, you want to take someone's life?" The loud slaps caused his face to swell instantly. Though the blows were painful, he continued smiling eerily. Suddenly he let out a horrific shriek, so sharp it didn't sound human. Immediately after, his eyes rolled back, his entire body convulsed violently, blood gushing from his nostrils and then from his mouth, white foam bubbling at his lips. He looked as if someone were strangling him, his face pale, breath weakening rapidly. Horrified, my grandfather pinned him down and shouted, "Sister Lu, come quickly and see what's happening to him." Madame Lu rushed over, observed Zhang Laoni's condition, and immediately ordered, "Hold him down now!" My grandfather could not restrain him alone, so he called for Zhang Laoni's wife to help. She was so terrified she could barely stand, but she still forced herself to help hold him down. At that moment, Madame Lu pulled out several silver needles and swiftly inserted them into a few vital acupuncture points on Zhang Laoni's body.
Chapter 17. Killing Aura. The moment the silver needles were inserted into Trang Laoni's body, his convulsions stopped, the nosebleeds ceased, his mouth no longer frothed, and his breathing gradually stabilized. My grandfather thought Madame Liu had already expelled the golden weasel from his body, but upon seeing the look on her face, he immediately realized it was far from over. Madame Liu placed her hand on Trang Laoni's abdomen and gently pressed a few times, and my grandfather was shocked to discover a small lump of flesh, about the size of a child's fist, beneath his skin, constantly moving, sometimes darting left, sometimes leaping right. Madame Liu narrowed her eyes, gripping the silver needle tightly, carefully tracking the movement of the lump, trying to stab it, but after several attempts she still could not hit it. My grandfather, frightened, asked urgently, "Sister, what exactly is that?" Madame Liu replied sternly, "It is killing aura, condensed from the golden weasel's resentment. If we don't remove it, Trang Laoni will certainly die." Sweat began to bead on Madame Liu's forehead as she continued attempting to pierce the thing. But the lump moved too quickly, dodging non-stop, preventing her from striking accurately. After several failed attempts, she looked up anxiously and said, "Brother Niu, go to the well and fetch a basin of freshly drawn cold water." My grandfather rushed to the well and filled a bucket with water. Well water is groundwater, and even in the scorching summer heat, it was ice-cold like frozen water. He carried the bucket to her and asked, panicked, "What should I do next?" "Pour all of it on him," Madame Liu ordered firmly. Without hesitation, my grandfather lifted the bucket and dumped all the well water on Trang Laoni. Even a dead man would jump up if splashed with such cold water, but Trang Lao Ni only twitched slightly before going still again. The moment the icy water hit him, the strange lump on his stomach, which had been moving non-stop, suddenly froze for an instant. Seizing the opportunity, Madame Liu thrust the silver needle precisely into the lump. Her hand was steady as a mountain. As soon as the needle pierced, she yanked it upward, causing the lump to explode, spraying out thick black fluid with an overpowering stench, making my grandfather reel back, clutching his nose and stumbling away. It smelled like a rotten egg smashed directly into one's face, nauseating to the extreme. But Madame Liu didn't even flinch, remaining by Trang Lao Ni's side as the black liquid continued to ooze, flowing endlessly until the lump gradually shrank and finally disappeared completely. Only then did Trang Lao Ni begin to breathe normally again, his complexion turning rosier. Madame Liu exhaled heavily and collapsed beside him. But just as she caught her breath, an unexpected change occurred. Trang Lao Ni suddenly shot upright, stiff as a wooden plank. His eyes completely white, the blood vessels dark red and spreading across the entire surface, making him look like someone suffering from severe cataracts. Seeing this, Madame Liu panicked as her eyes darted around searching for something. And then an even more bizarre scene unfolded. Trang Lao Ni suddenly dropped to the ground on all fours, his back arched, his tongue stretched out, sweeping across the floor, and began crawling around the courtyard with unnerving agility. He now resembled a giant golden weasel trapped in a human body, his throat emitting strange hissing noises, his face contorted with viciousness. Horrified, my grandfather rushed to grab the large cleaver stuck in the ground and drew it, shouting, "Sister, what is happening to him now?" Madame Liu gritted her teeth and replied, "There is not just one golden weasel here. There is another, stronger one. Hurry and find it. Kill it, or Lao Ni will not survive." As she spoke, she lit her smoking pipe and took a deep, forceful drag, the embers blazing brightly. My grandfather hesitated, frowning. "Does it really have to be killed? These golden weasels came because of Xiao Keep. Capturing it alive or driving it away should be enough." Madame Liu replied, "Do as you see fit." Hearing that, my grandfather gripped the cleaver and searched the courtyard, running in circles twice, yet seeing no trace of a golden weasel, while Trang Lao Ni kept lunging violently at Madame Liu, attacking without pause. He was unnaturally strong and felt no pain. Even when Madame Liu struck him with the burning hot pipe, he did not dodge, continuing to charge wildly. Seeing this, my grandfather grew even more desperate. He had searched the entire courtyard. Could the golden weasel now be hiding inside the house? Thinking this, he tightened his grip on the cleaver and strode into Trang Lao Ni's home. The house had only 3 rooms, and he searched all of them thoroughly, even checking under the bed, but still found nothing. Sweat began to form on his forehead. Wang Biti had already killed Trang Lao Wu, and if Trang Lao Ni died as well, it would be catastrophic. Gripping the cleaver tightly, he returned to the main room, narrowing his eyes as he scanned the surroundings. By chance, he looked up and noticed something strange, a white shape protruding from the ceiling beam. Looking closely, he realized it resembled a tail. The more he looked, the more familiar it seemed, identical to the tail of a Wang Biti, except this one was white. Uncertain, he quietly glanced around before grabbing a teacup from the table and hurled it at the white tail. Thud! The cup hit it directly, making the tail twitch. It was alive. Now certain that the creature lying on the beam was indeed a Wang Biti, he spoke in a low voice. "Great Weasel Spirit, the Trong family knows their wrongdoing. Please forgive them this time." Seeing the Wang Biti remain unresponsive, he grabbed several more teacups and threw them upward repeatedly. The creature was struck again and again, screeching angrily as a sharp head poked out from above, its blood-red eyes filled with ferocity. My grandfather finally saw it clearly. It was indeed a Wang Biti, but its tail was completely white. It was said that the longer a weasel spirit cultivated, the more white fur it developed, and now this one had an entire white tail, proving its cultivation was by no means low.
The white-tailed Huangbi fox glared at my grandfather, baring its fangs and growling threateningly. But the beam was too high, and my grandfather couldn't reach it. Madame Lu had said before that the only way was either to drive it away or kill it. Otherwise, Trung Lao Mi could never return to normal, and if not, he would surely be tormented to death by the Huangbi fox, and even Madame Lu herself could be in danger. My grandfather wasn't truly afraid of this creature. Over the years, they had appeared around our family constantly, bringing offerings every day, and truthfully, he even felt a bit of affection for them and didn't want to use heavy-handed measures. But this time, things had gone too far. If the Huangbi fox only caused small trouble, my grandfather could turn a blind eye. But they had killed someone, and now wanted to harm more people. This was unforgivable. After thinking for a while, my grandfather decided to act. Pulling a chair to the middle of the room, standing on it and lifting the large saber high to slash at the Huangbi fox on the beam. Not to kill it, only to force it to leave. But this Huangbi fox was extremely quick, leaping back and forth across the beam, avoiding every blow. Only the beam itself ended up cracked, with wood dust flying everywhere. Right then, from outside came Madame Lu's shout. "Ngo Lao Kei, come out! I have something to tell you!" My grandfather glanced at the Huangbi fox one more time, then jumped down from the chair and ran outside. As soon as he reached the yard, he saw Madame Lu struggling with Trung Lao Ni. "Sister, that Huangbi fox is on the beam. I tried to chase it but couldn't catch it," my grandfather said anxiously. Hearing this, Madame Lu shouted, "Stop dealing with it, hurry home, and bring your grandson here. Maybe Tiao Kep can force the Huangbi fox to leave." My grandfather froze for a moment, but realized she was right. The Huangbi fox came to the Trung family because of what happened. It all stemmed from them coming to my house and slapping me, even beating my father. Those who beat me were disrespectful to the celestial spirit within me. For years, the golden weasels and foxes brought offerings to our home, not for me, but for the celestial spirit. Perhaps if I appeared, I truly could make the golden fox leave. While my grandfather hesitated, Madame Lu urged again. "Ngo Lao Kei, don't just stand there. Go bring your grandson here now. I can't hold on much longer. The golden fox is controlling Trung Lao Ni. I don't dare use force, or he might die." Hearing this, my grandfather immediately replied, "Sister, hold on just a bit longer. I'll be right back." Then he grabbed the saber and ran home, dragging me out from under the blanket and rushing back to Trung Lao Ni's house. At that time, I was still sleepy and didn't understand anything, only knowing I was being pulled hurriedly. When we arrived, I was stunned by the sight. The yard was a chaotic mess, chicken blood everywhere, chicken corpses scattered on the ground, and a large golden fox with its head smashed open, bleeding all over. Trung Lao Ni was growling like a wild beast, repeatedly attacking Madame Lu. "Tiao Kep, tell your Uncle Ni to stop," my grandfather shouted. The image of the Trung brothers beating my father earlier that day, his head covered in blood, was still vivid in my mind. Seeing Trung Lao Ni this way, I was terrified, but also felt a hint of satisfaction. "Grandpa, they beat my father and made him bleed," I said. My grandfather snapped. "Stop talking nonsense. Tell him to stop. We'll deal with the rest later." Then he smacked my bottom. I pouted and reluctantly took a few steps forward, softly saying, "Uncle Ni, stop." The moment those words left my mouth, Trung Lao Ni immediately froze. He slowly turned his head toward me. Madame Lu quickly took the chance to retreat several steps, panting heavily. After wrestling so long with someone possessed by a golden fox, her strength was clearly exhausted, while Trung Lao Ni showed no sign of fatigue because his body had been pushed beyond its limits. If this continued, he might die from exhaustion without realizing it. I looked into his white, clouded eyes, bloodshot and filled with veins, and shivered. Suddenly, he spoke in a shrill voice. "They have disrespected the ancestor spirit. I must kill them all." I looked at my grandfather, not knowing what to do. He was stunned too, not expecting my words to have no effect. Right then, the white-tailed golden fox that had been crouching on the beam suddenly walked out through the door, its blood-red eyes fixed on me. The moment it appeared, Trung Lao Ni let out a strange shriek and suddenly bolted towards the front yard. "Stop him! Don't let him run outside!" Madame Lu shouted, and hurried after him. My grandfather and I immediately blocked the doorway. Without hesitation, he rushed straight towards Trung Lao Ni, but before he could swing his saber, Trung Lao Ni flung him aside. The sight terrified me so much I forgot to react, but somehow I instinctively reached out and grabbed Trung Lao Ni's pant leg. He continued running, dragging me, and causing me to fall hard on the ground. I cried loudly in pain. The moment I cried, Trung Lao Ni suddenly stopped, turned back, bent down and picked me up, and gently brushed the dust from my clothes. Then he turned as if to leave again. At that moment, I felt a loud buzzing in my head. The whole world spun, everything went dark, and I lost consciousness. My grandfather and Lu were stunned when they saw a giant shadow appear behind me. It was the form of a fox with 8 long tails swaying behind it. Trung Lao Ni, who had been about to leave, suddenly froze as if sensing an invisible aura. He slowly turned his head toward me, and in an instant dropped to his knees, trembling violently. Go away, stop, I said, but the voice that came out was not that of a 6-year-old child, but the clear voice of a young woman. Trung Lao Ni trembled, his head buried under his arms, respectfully saying, "Ancestor spirit, they were disrespectful to you. How could you spare them so easily?" I continued, "You dare not even obey my words?" Trung Lao Ni immediately cowed down 3 times heavily. The loud thud, thud, thud echoed across the ground. Not far away, the white-tailed golden fox also bent down and cow-downed respectfully toward me. Just a few seconds later, Trung Lao Ni's body shuddered and collapsed, unconscious, on the ground.
Seeing me in that state, Madame Louis immediately understood that the celestial spirit inside me had manifested. She froze for a moment, then instantly dropped to her knees, covering her head with both hands, not daring to look at me. "Xiaojia," grandfather called my name in a trembling voice, his eyes filled with shock. At that time, I had no consciousness at all, nor did I know what had happened. Everything I later learned came from grandfather's account. When I was 3 years old, the celestial spirit inside me had appeared once, but grandfather didn't witness it directly. This time was different. He saw everything clearly. Not only did my voice change, but behind me he could also see the massive silhouette of a fox spirit with 8 tails, each tail swaying rhythmically behind my back. The sight terrified him to the core. Fortunately, the manifestation did not last long. After Zhang Lao collapsed to the ground, the fox shadow gradually dispersed, and at the same moment, all strength left my body. I went limp and fell over. Grandfather panicked and rushed to hold me up. "Madame Louis, quickly, check what's wrong with Xiaojia," he shouted anxiously. Madame Louis finally stood up, took one look at me, and reassured him. "It's fine. Xiaojia is the same as last time. Rest a few days and he'll recover. The fox spirit inside him already has 8 tails. This is a true Millennium Great Spirit. Being able to witness it with my own eyes, even if I die now, I have no regrets." Her voice trembled with excitement. Grandfather carried me home on his back. I remained unconscious for 2 full days before waking up. After waking, I behaved completely normal, running and playing just like before. As for Zhang Lao, he wasn't harmed too badly, but after being tormented by the golden weasel, he was bedridden for 3 days before he could walk again. Later, Madame Louis told us about the golden weasel. She said this creature could trade lives because it could release a special toxin, its foul breath. The odor didn't merely disgust people, it induced extremely vivid hallucinations. Many who inhaled it were terrified to death by their own illusions. Zhang Laowu and Zhang Lao were both victims of this toxin. The only difference was Zhang Laowu lived alone, so no one noticed his condition, while Zhang Lao was lucky to have his wife nearby. If she hadn't called grandfather and Madame Louis in time, he might not have survived either. I asked Madame Louis why the golden weasel died if it only used poison to confuse people. She explained that although its toxic breath could rob humans of rationality,
The weasel itself had to immerse completely in that toxic environment for the effect to reach its maximum potential. To kill someone, it had to sacrifice itself, fully merging its body with the poison space, so the toxin inside it could exert its deadliest force. But the white-tailed golden weasel spirit controlling Zhonglao was different. It didn't rely solely on toxins. It had high spiritual cultivation, capable of manipulating humans and making them perform complex actions. Everything eventually ended. One calamity every 3 years. Either I would die, or someone else would. Those who died were undoubtedly connected to me. But despite everything, I was completely passive, unable to change anything. Madame Louise said this was my fate, a destined tribulation I could not escape, and those involved with me could not avoid it either. Perhaps one day I might encounter a great opportunity that would let me defy destiny. But that day was not now, and Madame Louise did not possess that power. After the incident, Madame Louise stayed at our house for several days, waiting until I woke up before leaving. Before she left, she warned my family repeatedly, "When the boy turns 9, do not let him step outside. The third calamity is the most dangerous. One small mistake, and he could lose his life. If he survives the 9th-year calamity, things may improve." She promised she would return when the time came. After everything settled, our household slowly returned to normal. I behaved like any other child. I ate meals with my family and no longer drank blood. Yet the golden weasels and fox spirits continued bringing wild animals to our home, helping improve our living conditions. Sometimes, when I was alone, I still saw those golden weasels and fox spirits standing at a distance, silently watching me. 3 more years passed in the blink of an eye. Nothing supernatural occurred. My life was quiet, like that of any other child. I started school. I was now in 2nd grade. I had been born during the harvest season, the busiest time of the year. Everyone in the village worked the fields and had no time to watch children. Anyone who has lived in the countryside knows, when the harvesting machines arrive, your family's plot must be harvested immediately, otherwise someone else will take the grain. Back then, our entire household depended on the harvest. Food was survival. Because nothing strange had happened for 3 years, the calamity was gradually forgotten, though my family still remembered Madame Louise's warning. My parents went to the fields, but specifically left grandfather at home to watch me. On the day I turned 9, coincidentally a weekend, I stayed home doing homework. At noon, grandfather and I ate lunch together. Being old, he felt sleepy afterwards. Before going to nap, he warned me sternly, "No matter what, do not leave the house today. If you go out, I'll tan your hide." But grandfather hadn't even fallen asleep yet when something happened. Someone shouted outside. It was the village pig butcher asking for help restraining a large hog. He claimed they couldn't control it. Grandfather initially refused, afraid I would sneak out, but thinking it was village business, he reluctantly agreed. He warned me again not to leave the house, then went with the man. Not long after grandfather left, I heard a bird call from outside my window, the secret signal between me and Wei Feng, my classmate. Since childhood, the village kids never played with me. They said I was a freak. But Wei Feng was different. He was my closest friend. He was chubby, and everyone called him Xiao Peng. Hearing his signal, I quietly went to the window and opened it. His round, chubby face popped up immediately. He grinned and whispered, "Xiaojia, let's go catch grasshoppers." "Catch what? Grandfather won't let me out. If I get caught, I'll be beaten," I complained. Xiao Peng pouted. "You have no right to lecture me on studying. I'm second worst in class, but you're dead last." He wasn't wrong. I was indeed at the bottom. Not because I was stupid, but because I didn't like studying and my family never forced me. All they wanted was for me to grow up safely. Everything else didn't matter. In the end, I couldn't resist the temptation. I climbed out the window and followed Xiao Peng out of the village. At this age, every child loves to play. The more adults forbid something, the more children want to do it. Who hasn't been beaten once or twice for mischief?
Chapter 20. The Terrifying Scream. Back then, there were no entertainments like now. No phones, no computers, no TV. Kids could only find fun on their own. Going down to the river to catch fish,
climbing trees to take birds' nests, or going out to the fields to catch grasshoppers. We were already tired of scooping fish in the river, and all the birds' nests around the village had been searched clean by the two of us. Not a single nest worth looking for remained, so today we could only catch grasshoppers. At this time, grasshoppers were plump, and once caught, you could skewer them on bamboo sticks and roast them. They smelled amazing. After leaving the village, the two of us split up, each holding a branch to flip through the grass to find grasshoppers. I had no idea what Shalbezo ate that morning, but not long after we reached the field, he suddenly clutched his stomach and groaned, "Oh my God, my stomach hurts so much!" And right after saying that, he pulled down his pants, squatted into a bush, and let out a loud, heroic, rattling scream. I covered my nose and glared at him. "Shalbezo, you truly are lazy to the bone! You poop everywhere! You eat too much! Catch some grasshoppers and maybe eat less!" The stench hit me so hard my head spun. I had no idea what strange thing he had eaten for his poop to smell that awful. Unable to stand it, I moved farther away. "Shalkyep, you keep catching, I'll help you when I'm done. I swear I'll catch more than you," Shalbezo said while grimacing. Right at that moment, I instinctively turned my head and my eyes widened. An enormous grasshopper was leaping straight towards Shalbezo's butt. I swear, since childhood, I had never seen a grasshopper that big. It jumped once and landed directly onto his sensitive spot. "Oh my God!" Shalbezo shuddered, about to stand up in shock, but I quickly yelled, "Shalbezo, don't move! A giant grasshopper is right there! Squeeze tight! Don't let it escape!" Hearing me, Shalbezo took a deep breath, sucked in his belly, and clamped his butt cheeks together, actually trapping the grasshopper. I was thrilled and prepared to rush over and grab it, but at that exact moment, a majestic rooster suddenly burst out of the bushes and lunged straight towards Shalbezo. It turned out that the giant grasshopper was the prey that Rooster had been chasing, and in panic, it had unintentionally jumped onto the worst possible place. In my hometown, these chickens were called running chickens. They weren't fed with feed, but roamed freely, digging for worms and hunting insects. These chickens had extremely strong fighting abilities and lightning-fast reactions. Not only grasshoppers, they could catch mice and even peck baby snakes to death. And sometimes, they dared to fight cats and dogs. As for attacking humans, they did that almost daily, becoming the nightmare of all village children. Everything happened too fast. Before I could react, a large rooster suddenly leapt out of the grass, didn't hesitate at all, and lunged directly at the sensitive area behind the fat boy where the grasshopper was trapped. It pecked once, hard, and immediately snatched the grasshopper away and bolted so fast no one could see which direction it ran. The fat boy's scream echoed across the entire field, probably traveled several miles. I stood frozen, completely unsure what to do. I swear, I never expected such a thing to happen. The so-called catch cicadas while sparrows lurk. This time, the rooster played the role of the sparrow perfectly, stealing the prize in the most unexpected way. But that peck must have been painfully heaven-piercing. Later, the fat boy told me the pain felt like a red-hot iron clamp stabbing straight into that place, like tens of thousands of ants crawling all over him, a burning heat rising from his butt up to the back of his neck. The feeling was indescribable. His scream not only frightened me, but caused chaos throughout the village. Rumor has it, some kids in the neighboring village heard that horrifying scream and had nightmares that night. They even invited a shaman to perform a ritual. But the unluckiest person was Wang Grandpa, who happened to be driving his donkey cart past the path we were playing on. Wang Grandpa was nearly 70, an experienced driver in the village. When he was young, he drove horse carts and ox carts, but as he aged and weakened, he could only manage a small donkey. That donkey had been trained so well, it was like a living navigation system. It always followed commands perfectly and never took the wrong path. But even the smoothest driver can lose control. When the donkey heard the fat boy's terrifying scream, it was so frightened its tail shot up and dashed forward madly. The jolt was so strong that the long smoking pipe in Wang Grandpa's mouth flew several meters away. And not only that, the shock knocked out his last remaining front tooth, officially sending it into retirement. The panicked donkey ran wildly, and Wang Grandpa was thrown backwards, his whole body flung off the cart.
Villagers later said the donkey ran 20 miles to the next town before being stopped, while Wang Grandpa rolled into a ditch, lying there moaning, "Oh heavens, I'm done for half a day, unable to get up." I panicked, not knowing what to do. The fat boy, though in pain and crying, wasn't in danger, but Wang Grandpa was old, and a fall like that could be serious. With no other choice, I ran to the ditch and tried to lift him up. He really had taken a hard fall and couldn't stand, probably hurt his back, but he was fully conscious. As soon as he saw me, he glared at me and shouted, "You little brat! What are you yelling for? Trying to kill me?" I panicked. "Wang Grandpa, it wasn't me! It was the fat boy screaming!" Before I could finish, he slapped me. Bop! Still lying! The whole field is empty! Who else but you? The slap made my head ring. I couldn't believe the old man, after such a terrible fall, still hit that hard. But just as I was still dizzy, several golden weasels and foxes suddenly appeared from the roadside bushes. They stood silently staring at Wang Grandpa. Seeing them, I panicked. I knew that when golden weasels and foxes appeared, it never meant good. They always came to punish those who harmed me, and the people they targeted always met terrible fates. Wang Grandpa hit me only out of anger. I didn't blame him at all, but if he had to pay with his life for a slap, this would be disastrous. I looked toward the golden weasels and foxes and quickly waved my hands. "This has nothing to do with him! Don't hurt him!" Wang Grandpa, who heard me mutter, got even angrier and swung his hand to hit me again, shouting, "Why are you standing there babbling? Help me up!" That snapped me back, and I tried my best to lift him up, but I was too weak to get him up. Right then, a villager passed by, and I called for help. With his assistance, we finally pulled Wang Grandpa out of the ditch, but I didn't expect that in the end, something still happened to him.